maybe before you can ask him questions after that, you give him a chance to clarify those parts of the evidence he gave yesterday that he wishes to clarify.
Thank you.
So that as we move on, we know exactly what the clarification is.
Yes, thank you, Chair.
Ambassador, with regard to the letter that your PA wrote to Mr. William Machila, you did give evidence to the fact that there must have been a misunderstanding either on her part, or there must have been a misunderstanding on her part, or you may have failed to articulate what you wanted to convey to her properly, because you never intended to say that you had approved the request. Is that correct?
Yes, it's correct, Mr. Chair.
What I wanted to ask you is whether the reference to the request whether the position is not that the reference to the request was not a reference to the request for a clearance, because I think your evidence was premised on the understanding that when she talked about a request in that email, she was talking about a request for clearance. Hence, you said you had no power to grant a request for clearance. That was the job of the Department of Defense. Certain requirements had to be met before they could decide whether they were granting or not granting, and you would know nothing about whether those requirements were met. Is my summation of what you were saying correct?
Chairperson, I was trying to convey that my aim was to ask my personal assistant to communicate that I wanted the officials there to process the application for the flight clearance.
Yes, you were not. You were saying you didn't want her to convey anything to the effect that you had approved the request for clearance.
Correct, sir.
Because that fell outside your mandate.
Correct.
Yes. Now, my question is whether the reference to the request wasn't meant to refer to be a reference to a request for the visit, so that what she may have intended to say is that as far as this visit is concerned, Ambassador Koloane has approved, or DERCO has approved the visit, the request for a visit. You people must now deal with the request for clearance.
No, Chairperson, because I had not communicated with anybody within DERCO who had confirmed that they had approved such, and normally that will have to be approved by the branch which deals with the country. In this case, it will have been the branch Asia and the Middle East. So I was merely communicating about the request to process the clearance.
But if there was to be a visit, I think Ambassador Jerry Machila yesterday talked about 2 note verbals and said in regard to the first one, it might just be a request for a visit, to do a visit to South Africa by a foreign head of state or ministers. And once that request has been approved, then there might be another note verbal which then comes with details about flights and so on and so on, which seemed to suggest to me that there needs to be an approval of the request first. And I think either he or another witness made a reference, and it may have been you, I may be mistaken, made a reference to the fact, I think it's another witness, not you, that if it's a head of state or prime minister or deputy head of state who wants to meet with the president of the country, the DERCO would communicate with the president to establish whether the president says it's fine, they can visit and meet with him. And the one could understand that. Is that something that accords with your understanding of what would happen sometimes with requests for visits where the head of state in South Africa would be met?
Mr. Chairman, you are correct. Whenever there is going to be a request by any head of state to come and visit our president, the embassy of that country will then write, well, they will normally have a number of meetings building up to the visit, but once they've agreed, then they will actually officially communicate that the president, through the non-verbal, to the desk, that the president would like to pay a visit or a state visit or official visit during the following dates, and that information is communicated to the desk. And then the desk will consult with the minister, who in turn will check with the presidency whether the president is available or the deputy president, depending on who will be met. And then once they confirm that the date is acceptable, they will also communicate back to the embassy accordingly that is acceptable. After that, then once the date has been set up, during the DGF, which is the Director General's Forum, which is chaired by the Director General, and all the DDGs attend, normally there is a platform for us to exchange information about what's happening in the department. And then the DDG, in this case, if maybe it was Asia DDG, if it was a Japan Prime Minister coming, then he will report that, by the way, we'll have a visit on this day. In some cases, he may even ask for assistance from other colleagues. Or if maybe that happens before the DGF happens, he will normally then consult the Office of the Chief of State Protocol, indicated, hey, by the way, we've got this thing coming. I've asked the embassy of that country to start getting in touch with you regarding logistics. And once that happens, the embassy will then send a note verbal to us requesting a meeting, whether there is a flight available that would be landing in Waterkloof or not. They will then communicate requesting a meeting so that we can deal with the logistics. So there are two separate note verbals, but the one that goes to the protocol office is dependent on the first one being dealt with by the desk and agreeing on the date that of that particular visit.
So it would be correct, would it not be, to say that there is approval of the visit that must happen before the Defense Force can consider a request for clearance, leaving out as to who must give approval for now, but there is approval of the visit that must happen first. Is that not so?
The person who is targeted for that particular meeting by the foreign political principal, of course, will have to confirm that they are available on that particular set date, if it's an official visit. But if it's a private visit, there is no need, because there is no targeted person who has to approve, but we still have to extend protocol courtesies depending as well on the level of the person coming. If it's a head of state, we provide more courtesies than we would, for example, if it's just a minister coming for a private visit as well.
I wonder whether when one looks at that email from your PA, it shouldn't be read to mean what she was saying you had done was that the visit, as far as DERCO is concerned, was in order. If she was saying that, would that be in line with what could be said in the light of the processes that DERCO has in regard to these requests for visits and so on, or would that not be in line?
It will not be in line, Chairperson, because the Chief of Protocol is not the one who approves visits. It's dealt with by the line function departments. In this case, the DDGs of the various branches will be the ones who can only say yes, after consulting, then say yes, the visit has been approved by the principal, and communicate that to protocol.
I'm just wondering whether this is a case where she completely got the whole thing wrong, in the sense that she thought you had said you were approving the clearance, because that doesn't seem to tie in, because the clearance was supposed to be approved by the Defense Force. But what I was thinking is that it's possible maybe that there is something that you may have conveyed to say it was in order from DERCO's side, other than saying the clearance was being approved, and that maybe the misunderstanding, if any, might have been in that you may have intended to say, tell them that from DERCO's side, everything is in order. They must do their side. That's what I was wondering, whether that's where the misunderstanding, if there is a misunderstanding, happened. You meant to say, we as DERCO, we think everything is in order, but they must do their side.
Mr. Chairman, there was nothing in DERCO which said the plan or the application was in order and that the visit was approved by DERCO at all. And that's why I'm trying to indicate that that's not what I was communicating to her. I was trying to communicate that she must talk to the people responsible with the processing of the flight clearance to do what they're supposed to do, which is to process the flight clearance. But I, again, maybe failed to communicate appropriately, or she misunderstood what I was saying.
Well, I understood from Merchant JC and or Mr. William Machila's evidence that Mr. JC did indicate or had indicated or conveyed the position that he wanted something in writing. I understood him to be saying, and my recollection may be inaccurate, I understood him to be saying that he wanted something in writing before he could go further with the processing of the request for clearance. And if that part of his evidence is correct, it might be difficult to say he wanted something in writing to simply say process the application, because once he has received the application, I would imagine he would know his duties to process it. He doesn't need a letter from DERCO saying process it. He might have wanted something more. What do you say to that possibility?
Mr. Chairperson, it is possible that he might have wanted something more, but that something more would have had to come from the line function dealing with the visit. If it was Asia, then they would have actually said, yes, that date has been confirmed, if it had been communicated or managed itself directly by the particular branch. And maybe, Chair, also, it might help, if it pleases the Chair, that the request made by my legal counsel If the chair deems it good and fit to grant it, that maybe I talk to it because it might address some of the questions that the chair is actually trying to get to right now.
Yes, no, that's fine. Maybe let's do that. Give all the clarifications you wish to give in relation to any aspect of evidence that you gave yesterday, and then thereafter we can then take it from there.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. First of all, I want also to thank you for granting myself and my legal counsel the opportunity to get a copy or to get the recording, because it has helped us and helped me in particular to refresh my memory on some of the issues that had been raised. And of course, having taken place a long time ago, it made it some of the things I might not have recollected properly. Hence, in some instances, I will indicate that I am not sure or I'm not certain. But now that we have had a chance to listen to the recording, try to think backwards, I would like to draw the chair's attention as well as the lead counsel's attention to Exhibit FF1, which had been referred to yesterday.
Yes.
On page 11.
Yes.
The first confirmation or correction I would like to make is that whilst I might have said in my discussion with Mr. Njisi that there might be 6 to 8, I think I was correctly reminded that I did indeed say to Mr. Njisi during the telephone discussion that there were 4 to 5 ministers on board.
Yes.
And that was based on the information which had been communicated to me by the High Commissioner of the Indian Embassy. Immediately after that sentence, he said, Mr. Njisi said, he added that the Minister of Transport, Mr. Ben Martins, had been given instructions by the President to assist the Gupta family, that the Minister of Defense and Military Veterans has no objection, and that at the meeting at the Minister of Transport, the CEO of AXA and the Guptas, he had been told to assist, and that this was a unique case. Here, Mr. Chair, I would like, having listened also to the recording, I would like to admit that indeed I did what has now become popularly known as name dropping, and used those sentences merely to push the officials who were supposed to process the flight clearance to do their job, to do the processing. And I also want to go on record, Mr. Chair, that that was fundamentally nothing but name dropping, and as it is popularly known nowadays, but that the Minister of Transport, nor the Minister of Defense, nor the President did not at any stage communicate to me that I should in any way deal with this matter as it is expressed. The only time, and as I indicated, where I had interaction with the Minister, Ben Martins, was at the meeting which I made reference to, which was at OR Tambo, where he wanted to solicit our advice together with that of the CEO of AXA, and where we advised that it will not be prudent for the plane to land there, and for the reasons which I've already explained. But he, even in that meeting, did not, I want to repeat, he did not say that he was given any orders to assist the Guptas. And that was just a fault from my side, which I take full responsibility for. And again, I want to stress that it was fundamentally to put, if I may use the word, to put pressure on the officials to expedite the process of processing the flight clearance request. And I think, again, whilst I wasn't certain, as I indicated, but it's already been cleared, and again, thanks to the chair authorizing the release of the recording, that indeed the pre-check at the Waterkloof actually happened before the flight clearance was actually issued. And maybe also to clarify, Chair, what I meant by the fact that this was a unique case. Unique in that, as far as I can recollect, in the history of South Africa, we have never had a family chartering a plane with so many individuals and one requesting to land, be it either at OR Tambo International Airport or requiring also to land at the Waterkloof. So there were uniqueness in terms of something that's never happened before, and there was no precedent in terms of how those kind of things get dealt with. Did I state that it was for the Gupta family? Now that I've been helped by the recording, indeed, Chair, because in the discussion, it's a pity not everything is captured here. But in the discussion, of course, we will talk about the Gupta family trying to land at OR Tambo. And then later on, there's an application also to attend a similar event, because I don't think it was hidden that the ministers are also coming for the wedding. So it was sinister that that could happen like that, and I think clearly the Guptas must have negotiated with the High Commission, and one made that kind of observation, and that's why I actually said this was clearly, and also compounded by the fact that, as I stated yesterday, one of the people who were present with the event or management company to go and do a pre-inspection was a member who worked for the Gupta business. So indeed, I did also, therefore, accordingly, in that context, state that. And I fully concur with the statement that in that last sentence that the presidency has never ever, even for the total duration of the time I served as the Chief of State Protocol, the president or the presidency has never ever interfered with the process, with the administrative process of facilitating the landing of airplanes, nor has it ever interfered in any protocol-related activities. And the only way that sometimes they could influence that is by only suggesting that the president would like to have a state banquet or dinner or lunch, so that we can accordingly adjust the program. But in terms of the logistics, we take full responsibility. We took full responsibility for that. So therefore, Chair, I would like to again repeat that by my own admission that I add to an error of judgment in wrongfully using the names of the Minister of Transport, the then Minister of Transport, Mr. Ben Martins, the current Minister of Defense, as well as the President, and in the statement that I made to try and exert pressure to the officials at who were supposed to facilitate the processing of the flight clearance. And I thank you, Chair. That's the clarification that I wanted to make. And yes. I thank the Chair for, again, authorizing that to be given the recording.
Yes, thank you. Yeah. Ms. Newman?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Ambassador, I so wish that it would be that easy, that a senior official like yourself can come here, like you did yesterday, and tell the Chair and deny all the things that are read out to you in that paragraph. And then once you've listened to the recording, everything must be perfect now, because now you've since recalled.
Well, maybe, sorry, before you proceed, yes. Maybe, Ms. Newman, it's not accurate to say he denied everything. He did say he did not recall whether he had made certain statements, and it may be that you might wish to talk
rephrase
about that. Yeah,
yes, maybe not.
There may be some things that he denied. There are some things that he said he did not recall. Remember that I had to explain to him the distinction between denying and saying I don't recall. So I think in regard to some of the things here, my recollection that he may have said he did not recall, but it may be that there are some on the same page that he denied. I just want you to say it might be inaccurate to say he denied all of those things.
Let me rephrase. Ambassador, I wish it was that easy, that an ambassador of this country can come to the commission as you did yesterday. And when certain things are put to you, and you can't recall, some you said they never happened, and you would not have said that. And now today, once you listen now to a recording, then the commission must accept that you made a mistake. And now you recall that you name dropped. Now surely, yesterday when that sentence about Minister Ben Martins was read out to you, when the Minister of Defense and Military Veterans was read out to you, if you knew that you had name dropped, that would have triggered that recollection. Is that correct?
No, it's not correct, Madam, because number one, I may want to make reference to what I said yesterday. On Thursday this week, last week, when we were talking to you, you indicated that when we requested this recording, that we could not get it because it's classified. And you already had it on Thursday because you told us so. Had you given us that, because I assume that it's only proper that if you are going to be bringing witnesses, you furnish them with all the necessary information, particularly for something that happened more than 6 years ago. So had we received that recording, I am sure that the issues that you are raising will not have occurred.
No, that doesn't answer the question. Let's start afresh. First of all, I did not have the recording on Thursday. We were told that it was a classified recording, and the chairperson advised you and your team yesterday that the recordings were made available to us on Sunday. So I didn't have any recordings on Thursday. Let's just get that clear.
Maybe I misunderstood you when you said that we cannot access it because your words, but sorry, you can't get it because it's a classified document.
No, we even said in a response to your lawyers that we did not have the recording. Mr. DBA, who communicated with them, can confirm that.
I could have misunderstood.
I'm not here to argue that with you. But let's talk about your recollection of the events that happened. You want the chairperson to believe that as of yesterday, before you listened to the recording, you did not know, could not recollect that you did name drop.
Yes, I did not recollect all the things. That's why, and also, if I was speaking with certainty, I would have responded accordingly. But like I said, this event happened more than 6 years ago, the incident, and I tried to put it behind me for a number of reasons, particularly related to my family, and that's why some of the facts related to that are not as vivid to me as they may be to you, Madam.
So, if then yesterday, your answer to you having used the name of Mr. Ben Martins, the Minister of Military and Defense, and the President, so if your answer to that question was no, you did not say so, that would have been a lie.
Yes, it would have been a misrepresentation, and again, because I did not have a recollection of the words that were actually there.
So, if then this commission had not been finished with the recording, it would mean that the commission would have continued on the impression that you attacked this report because it had factual inaccuracies, as you said yesterday, and without that recording, the commission would never have known what exactly transpired.
Most probably some of the facts will not have been available not only to the commission but to myself as well, but also to indicate that I did not only exclusively attack the report on the basis of this paragraph, but I indicated that the 4 people who were actually the authors of the report did not at any stage sit with me as the team of 4 to interview me so that I could present my case as well.
No, but we were dealing with the report and you were identifying the factual inaccuracies in the report.
Indeed, as far as my recollection went, I identified areas which I thought were not accurate.
Now let's just talk about this name dropping, you not having recollected it. Why were you charged?
I do not understand.
Well, why were you disciplined?
I was disciplined because one of the recommendations of the report was that all the affected sister departments must undertake internal disciplinary processes to take appropriate action against those who might have been implicated.
Yes. What were the charges that you faced?
Although I do not remember them off my head, but it was basically, one of them was, I think, breaching the procedures, if I recall, or protocols that have to be followed to process the flight clearance application, the undue influence on the other colleagues. I think there is a document somewhere, if maybe you could help me, because
Yes.
you obviously might know what it is, where there are 3 charges which are actually tabled there.
Yes. Thank you, Chair. May I refer the witness
Yeah,
to
do so, please, yes.
FF3? Yes.
Well, I see them in Exhibit FF3, and I'm looking at the chairperson's ruling starts at page 25. The charge sheet starts at page, I think, 6 or 7.
Page 5, Chair.
Oh,
Yes.
yeah.
The charge sheet begins at page 5.
Yeah.
Thank you. And then if you go to, it's just it deals with a letter to you, page 5 and 6, and then if you go to to page 7, that's where the annexure is, and that's where the charge sheet is.
Yeah.
Thank you. Now, my interest really is in charge 1, because that's where I'm going with question,
It's on page?
and at page 9. Could you just read paragraph 8?
Should I read it?
Yes, please.
It is alleged that during the period February 2013 to April 2013,
I'm sorry, that is charge 1, eh?
Charge 1, that is correct.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, you can just mention charge 1 and then read,
Yes.
so that even those who don't have the benefit of looking at the document, they know which one is charge 1, which one is charge 2, and so on.
Charge 1, Chair, it says, and I read, it is alleged that during the period February 2013 to April 2013, the employee abused diplomatic channels and took it upon himself to facilitate an illegal request for landing of an international aircraft at the Air Force Base Waterkloof on 30 April 2013 between 6 hours 50 and 7 hours.
Yes. And then there were factors to support that charge.
I'm not sure I understand the question you said.
No, this
Oh, you
is,
mean the ones below?
yes.
Okay. The factors in support of charge 1 are the following. The Indian High Commission failed to provide a note verbal to the Department of International Relations and Cooperation. This was a serious infringement of diplomatic protocol and heralded that this was not state business but a private matter. 9.2 says the employee spoke directly to the command post, Air Force Base Waterkloof, which was in conflict of the protocol to be used in that employee did not follow proper process by communicating with the head of defense force responsible for the affairs of the base. 9.3, the employee stated that there will be 4 to 5 ministers on the flight, which will be the equivalent of the members of the Executive Council in South Africa, whereas this was not the case, and this constituted a misrepresentation. 9.4, the employee in his communications with the command post dropped the names and the titles of the Minister of Transport, the Minister of Defense, military veterans, and the President in an effort to pressurize the command post to issue the clearance for such illegal landing.
Yes. So one of the charges that you faced had the name dropping as part of that charge, which is
Yeah.
charge 1.
Yes, it did.
Yes. So yesterday, you did
Well,
not...
I'm sorry, Ms. Norman. Would it not be better that
He finishes.
it deals with all the
All three.
charges, so that those who are watching or listening, they know what was charge 1, what was
Thank you.
charge 2, and charge 3, so
Yes.
that if we have to ask him about charges 2 and 3, there is clarity in the minds of those who don't have the benefit of the
Yes.
documents as to what those respective
you,
charges are
Chair.
related to.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, could you please proceed, Ambassador, charge 2?
Charge 2, it is alleged that the employee misrepresented facts in an endeavor to procure the illegal and unlawful and/or wrongful lending. The facts in support of this allegation are the following. The employee represented to the command post, Sergeant Major Njisi, in charge of permitting such lending, that this was a unique case with the knowledge that it was not. The employee motivated why he could not put the request in writing by innuendos that the President wanted to be of assistance to the Gupta family. Charge 3, the employee compromised the processes and procedures of his employer in that there was no review and/or recommendation from the political desk in the department of this particular request, and the interdepartmental coordination process that normally ensures that did not take place. The evidence in support of this charge will be, on April 9, 2013, the employee presented to the Directorate State visit that the request for flight clearance and landing at Waterkloof Air Force Base for the Indian delegation was telephonically approved by himself. The employee failed to provide an official clearance request when requested to do so by Sergeant Major Njisi at the Air Force Command Post. An individual in the Indian High Commission requested the employee on 24 April 2013 to facilitate arrangement for a private wedding reception at Waterkloof Air Force Base, and this amounted to the use of a senior government official to arrange a wedding reception at a strategic entry point, which was a major security violation.
Yes, and then this was dated 27 June 2013,
Yes, it was dated 27th of June 2013.
and you acknowledge receipt on the same day.
Correct. I was called by the DG to his office, and I did acknowledge it on the same day.
Yes, and how did you plead to those charges?
I pleaded guilty to administrative negligence and also inappropriate influencing of the officials, but I did not plead guilty to actually issuing, say, for example, to some of the things like, just to make an example, in the charge that is written here, that why is that? Read it as it is. That the request for the flight clearance and landing at Waterkloof Air Force Base for the Indian delegation was telephonically approved by myself because, like I said, I do not have authority to do so.
In charge 1, how did you plead? In respect of charge 1, how did you plead to that charge?
I again pleaded administrative negligence because the impression that had been created was that there had not been any application, and I had been informed by the High Commissioner of India that he had applied. And since I had indicated also yesterday that before that they had actually followed a similar process when they were hosting their head of state, I was of the assumption that all was done properly by the book, and that's why I followed up, because I thought these are the people who already know how it gets done. And I did agree that it's my, I add in that, because if I were to be a chief of protocol again, which of course I don't envy anymore, I would definitely have asked if there was, if all the documents were finished, like I would specifically ask in detail, has the following things been finished? But at that time, there's an oversight on my side, but that's basically what happened.
Yes. And when you pleaded guilty to charge 1, did you take into account what is stated in 9.4, which you've already read out, which relates to name dropping?
Yes, I did. I think I did, although I cannot recall it fully, but I think I did, but also indicated to that meeting, maybe the line of questioning was not the same either. But I did indicate that at no stage was Minister of Transport, Minister of Defense, and Minister of Veterans, or the President, did they in any way communicate with me, either by themselves or through their offices or anybody else in the offices that I should assist. So the only difference is that maybe the line of questioning was not the same, and probably the answers I provided are not necessarily going to be consistent with the line of questioning now.
Yes. You see, this is what troubles me, Ambassador, because you had pleaded guilty to name dropping. But then yesterday, before you listening to the recording, this is one of the things that you said you would not have said to Warrant Officer Njisi. So any person who had been charged, knowing that my charge is related to name dropping, and any person now who's confronted with a report by the DGs saying that there was a mentioning of President, of the Minister of Defense, of the Minister of Transport, that would have triggered a response that, Chair, in as much as I can recall that this is how I put it, but I know that I did admit guilt, that I did name drop. That perhaps is what I would have expected a response from you to be yesterday.
Chair, if I may.
Yes.
I apologize for interrupting my learned friend, but
Yes.
I object to the fairness of the question on this basis. The question is put to the witness in the form of the manner in which he pleaded guilty to the charges. And it's put to him as a proposition on that basis. And he's expected to either admit or deny that, recalling from 27th of June 2013. Whereas in this very same exhibit that we're looking at, we can see what the chairperson's ruling is. And we can see that although he pleaded guilty to the charges, there were reservations. And it would only be fair to the witness, rather than asking him to recall back so long ago, but to actually put to him exactly the nature of what took place at the inquiry, rather than putting to him as a proposition, you pleaded guilty to name dropping. We should see what in fact took place, and that's contained in the chairperson's ruling.
Yes. I think there may be room to sort out your concern without a ruling. Let me hear what Ms. Norman has to say.
Chair, there is nothing wrong with the question, because the question deals with the recollection. The witness says, I did not recollect yesterday, but then when I listened to the tape, I did. So I'm just showing him the materiality of the issue at hand, which is name dropping.
Just repeat
Yes.
the question you put to him so that I can...
Yes, thank you. Ambassador, the question I put to you was, having been charged, and one of the charges, like charge 1, which dealt with name dropping, and when you started out by clarifying, saying that you're clarifying to the chair, you said that you had used people's names to exert influence on the officials. So the question is now, if then you had done so, and you had pleaded guilty to charge 1, that, in my view, but you'll correct me if I'm wrong, would have triggered that recollection yesterday, that when I referred you to paragraph 2.1.15 of what is it that the DGs had said in that paragraph, knowing that you had been charged and knowing that you did in fact name drop as you've told us, that would have triggered that I recollect that this is what I said, or I recollect that this in fact did happen. Yes.
Maybe let me put it this way, without saying there is anything wrong with the way you have put
Thank
it.
you.
I think the question amounts to this. Having faced, among others, a charge which included an allegation that you had done what you call name dropping, and I'm not sure that this is name dropping, but what you call name dropping and what Ms. Norman calls name dropping. You have hinted that you had stated that the president knew about this or wanted the Gupta family to be assisted, and that the Minister Ben Martins had been instructed to assist, and the Minister of Defense had no objection. Knowing that in your disciplinary inquiry, this was one of the allegations you had faced, and that you had admitted that, as I understand the position, the question is, how could you have forgotten about that yesterday? Have I captured it correctly, Mr. Norman?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Yes,
Chair,
thank you.
If I may.
Yes,
That's the very problem with respect.
Yes,
Is if we look at the chairperson's ruling,
Yes.
he didn't plead guilty to name dropping. He pleaded guilty only to the charge, but excluded specifically the facts and evidence as were presented.
no, that's fine, but he can say exactly what you're saying. He can say, no, I didn't plead guilty to that, I pleaded guilty to that, and I excluded the facts. That's what he can say.
As it pleases, Chair.
Yes.
I think, Chair, my legal counsel has represented what I would have liked to express.
Yes, okay, so maybe we should start here. You pleaded guilty to charge, to all the three charges. Is that right?
If I remember, Chair, I think I did to all the three charges.
Yes, and you said, as I understand from the ruling of the chairperson, you were excluding the facts. Is that correct?
Come again, sir?
You said, if I understand the chairperson's ruling, that is the disciplinary hearing chairperson's ruling, if I understand it correctly, you said you were excluding the facts. You were not pleading guilty, I think, to the facts, or you may have intended to say you were not admitting certain facts. Is that correct?
Correct, Mr. Chair.
Yes. Now, let's hear from you in regard to charge 1, where the allegation was that during the period February 2013 to April 2013, you abused diplomatic channels and took it upon yourself to facilitate an illegal request for landing of an international aircraft at the Air Force Base, Waterkloof, on the 30th April 2013 between 6:50 and 7 in the morning. That allegation, you pleaded guilty to that allegation, is that correct?
Chair, if I'm not again 100% certain, but if I recollect, the three charges were discussed as, they were mentioned individually, but during the engagements and the discussions, the three charges tended to be discussed together. And because if you look at them as well, they actually overlap in some cases, particularly if you look at charge 1 and charge 2. So whilst I did plead guilty to the charges, there were certain components that I didn't really agree with, for example, which I then raised during that particular meeting.
Yes, okay. What we do know is there were three charges.
Correct?
What we do know is you pleaded guilty to three charges.
Correct.
What we do know is there was charge 1, charge 2, and charge 3.
Correct.
And what we must take as given is that faced with these charges, you would have applied your mind to each one to say, what do I say to this one? What do I say to that one? What do I say to that one? In preparation for the hearing. Is that correct?
Yes, correct.
That's correct. Now, in order to try and understand what it is that you were pleading guilty to, or what it is that you were admitting and not admitting, I ask the question. Look at the allegation in regard to charge 1, the allegations at page 26, and tell me whether you were admitting those allegations under charge 1. Let me leave out the issue of the factors supporting the charge which is mentioned elsewhere. Just that allegation. Did you admit that allegation, that charge or not? I repeat the charge, charge 1. It is alleged that during the period February 2013 and April 2013, the employee abused diplomatic channels and took it upon himself to facilitate an illegal request for landing of an international aircraft at the Air Force Base, Waterkloof, on the 30th April 2013 between 6:50 and 7:00 in the morning.
Chair, if I do recollect quite clear, I'm not sure again because it's a long time ago, I had certain issues with the language and the manner in which the charge itself was phrased. One of the things that I remember, for example, is that it says on line number 3, an illegal request. And I was actually asking what is meant by an illegal request, because I facilitated a request for lending. I did not facilitate an illegal request. I facilitated a request for lending, and the ruling or decision whether it would be granted will not be with me. So for me, I'm just making an example of one of the things that I do remember, that when I read it now, I see that I had an issue with the fact that it's phrased illegal request. I'm just making one of the examples of what I can remember.
Yes, but the primary allegation there is that you abused diplomatic channels and took it upon yourself to facilitate an illegal request, blah, 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 blah. Let's leave out the illegal request for now. Let's assume if it was just a request, would you say that you admit that you admit that allegation?
Again, I think if I remember, Chair, on that allegation, I indicated that there was a context into which this allegation can be premised. And the context of my involvement was based on the assumption that the proper diplomatic procedures had been followed by the Indian High Commission, but it only turned out that indeed it had not, because I learned that, for example, the note verbal had not been finished. And I took responsibility, therefore, accordingly, that I erred in that I should have checked first whether all the administrative requirements had been met. And in that context, therefore, I feel that I contributed to the situation because there was an oversight on my side that I didn't check that based on the assumption that it already been submitted, given that a few months earlier they had had their head of state coming to visit and were therefore accordingly familiar with the processes. So I'm trying to say, Chair, even during that disciplinary action, I had to explain the context in which these things happened, which at least helped everybody understand exactly what was said. And the phrasing accordingly of Charge 1, as it is in its current form, does not fully reflect the engagement and the discussion that transpired when this Charge 1 was admitted, or was expressed to me. However, I then said, with those qualifications that I had made, I do plead guilty to administrative oversight on my side, and also, I think, something along the lines of influencing of the officials who are supposed to process the flight clearance. I did plead to that.
Well, did you abuse diplomatic channels in order to facilitate the request for clearance for the landing of this aircraft?
No, Chair, I actually abused the power of my office in facilitating that by my office calling officials who are processing and exerting pressure on them. But at no stage did I have control over diplomatic channels, because diplomatic channels will refer to also the correspondence flowing from the Indian High Commission to DERCO and the other way around. In this case, as was indicated, the diplomatic channel that was utilized for applying for this flight clearance in question was that it was sent directly from the Indian High Commission to the Department of Defense. And what I agreed and accept then and accept now is that I used my office to follow up on why the flight clearance was not processed. And in light of what I've just said this morning to the Chair, whilst I had an intuition that obviously there is an involvement of the Guptas here as well, I think it would have been appropriate of me, in hindsight, even if it means I had gone to one of the senior officials in defense and said, look, of course, everything looks good on paper, but I've got the following intuition, you may want to look into it. And I admitted to that as well, Chair.
So you accept that in the process of seeking to put pressure, and you must just tell me if there is a part of what I'm saying that you don't agree with, do you admit that, therefore, in the process of what you did to put pressure on some officials in the Defense Force, to put pressure on them either to approve approve the request for a clearance or to expedite the processing, one of the two, you can indicate which one. In the process of putting pressure on them for one of those two, you abused your powers in the office that you held at the time.
Chair, I do accept that it's a clear abuse in hindsight, and look in hindsight, it's a clear abuse of my portfolio as the Chief of Protocol to have put pressure on the officials, in this case Mr. Njisi, to expedite the processing of the flight clearance, particularly given that I had not myself verified, even with him, whether all the administrative requirements have been met. And also in the context of what I've just said, Chair, that although there was no documented evidence, but I had the intuition that there was something that one could look at in terms of one of the members of the Gupta family or business members being part of the team that went for the inspection. I should have already sensed that there was something here untoward and communicated that to my counterpart in defense, be it the head of the general in charge of the Air Force Base or whatever.
That which you say you had an intuition of that was untoward, what was that?
I was saying, Chair, earlier on, we had been talking to the Guptas in the meeting which was held at the Waterkloof International Airport, where they indicated clearly that they were going to have guests coming for a wedding, etc., wherein we advised that it will not be appropriate, and the minister accordingly informed them, Mr. Martins, that sorry, I cannot assist you, you cannot land here, try Pilanesberg or the other airport. And then secondly, when they then applied also for the flight clearance at Waterkloof, they also did not hide that they had wedding guests coming, but in there will also be ministers who will also have some official engagements. And that's why I'm saying, my intuition told me that this is one and the same thing, but I'm saying I failed in my duties because I should have communicated such to my counterpart, or at least to somebody senior in the Ministry of Defense, Department of Defense, so that they could look into the matter.
That part which you say you failed to communicate to your counterpart at the Defense Force in the Department of Defense, was it that this was simply a private visit? What was it? I just want to make sure I don't speculate about what you are talking about, but that you articulate it.
Chair, what I'm saying is that I should have, my intuition was telling me that there's far too much coincidence here. That's basically what I was saying, but I was not aware whether they were indeed going to have meetings, as was stated when we were during the commission that some went to Bloemfontein, others to Cape Town, so I was not privy to the official meetings they were having. I was just making reference to the fact that this seems to be the same people who actually were going, who had actually asked first to land at Overtambo.
And if it was the same people, would I be correct to say that your attitude should have been, if you understood that it was the same people, your attitude should have been, but we told these people that they must go to Pilanesberg or Lanseria. They shouldn't come anywhere else. Why are they wanting to land in Waterkloof now? Am I correct to think that's what maybe your attitude should have been if you made the link?
When I said, Chair, when I failed in my duties, I failed in my duties because I should have advised one of the senior managers in defense and said, look, whilst it's your principal responsibility to process either grant or not grant, be aware of the following, and taken them to confidence in terms of what we had gone through with them, and left it to him or her to decide if they will grant or not grant, because that coincidence in itself does not necessarily mean that they could not have been granted or could have been
Yes.
granted, because that falls squarely in the area of
Yes.
defense.
But it would have helped to give them a full picture.
Correct, Chair.
Yes.
That's why, again, I said I admitted that as a government employee, not only just as a DERCO, it was my responsibility also to assist colleagues, even in other government departments, if I come across information that could benefit them, I should have communicated that. And that's why I actually admitted, if you like, negligence on my side on that.
Yes, Ms.
Yes.
Norman?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So can we accept then from the responses that you've given the chair that at the time when you used the name of the Minister of Transport, the Minister of Defense and Military Veterans and the President, you knew that was a lie because none of them had told you anything
Correct.
about this?
Correct.
So, and as senior as you were, you conveyed that lie to these employees in order to put pressure on them, as you've already mentioned.
Something I'm not proud of, but yes, it's true, I did put pressure on them to process that.
Yes. And then from what you have told the chair already, what is recorded, which is what you listened to yesterday, is the correct recordal of these conversations?
Yes, it is an accurate recording, and although I am not an IT specialist, but the voice therein sounds exactly like my voice, so I don't have any expertise to do verification, but the content of the recording is familiar, and therefore I cannot contest the accuracy of the content of that recording.
Yes. And would you then accept that in those instances where the DGs have quoted, to the extent that those quotations are consistent with what is contained in the recording, then the chair can accept those as being accurate?
Can you say that question again, ma'am?
Okay.
Chair, again, I'm sorry.
Oh, please.
Yes, I'm sorry, I didn't hear the question. Maybe I should hear it before you object.
Well, Chair,
Yeah.
I think we must just make clear what recordings are being referred to, because some of the recordings Mr. Koloane wasn't even a party to.
Yes, okay, thank you.
Chair, Mr. Koloane understands exactly what recordings we're talking about. Those are the audios that he has listened to that relate to him. I wouldn't be asking him about recordings that don't relate to him. Thank you. I was just saying, Ambassador Koloane, to the extent that the DGs have quoted in certain paragraphs, certain things that you may have said, in order for the chair to find that those are reliable, the chair must listen to the recording and those you would accept then as accurate.
If we are making reference to the recordings that were given to us last night, yes, ma'am, I do.
Thank you very much. Now, let's just
Well, maybe
take the tea agenda.
before you proceed, do you accept, Ambassador, that if what you say is true, namely, the President of the Republic at the time and the Minister of Transport at the time, Mr. Ben Martins, and the Minister of Defense then, who I think is still the Minister of Defense now, if it is true, as you say, that they never said the things that in the recording or in the conversation you had with Mr. Jesse, if they never, what you said about them was untrue, that was something very, very serious to say about people occupying those positions in the executive. It would be a serious thing if you said about anybody, but you were referring to the President of the country the Minister of Defense, the Minister of Transport. Do you accept that if you said this is what they said when they never said that to you, and you knew that they never said that, then what you did by using their names was very, very serious?
Chair, I will agree that it was wrong of me to use their names, not only because I just used their names to put pressure on the officials to do what they were supposed to do, which is the processing of the flight clearance, but also it potentially can taint the reputation and the image of the three that you have just mentioned. And it's something that I do take seriously, and that's why I admitted responsibility for my actions in that regard. And yes, it is a serious thing, like you said, for anyone to use anybody's name out of context.
As I understand the position, it didn't take long after the landing that the media suggested that you had made these statements about the president, maybe and the ministers, but I think about the president. Is that your recollection as well? That it didn't take long before the media was going with the story that you had made a statement that number one, or the president had a role to play.
It wasn't very long thereafter, but I'm not sure about how many weeks or whatever.
Yes, but it would have been a matter of weeks.
Correct.
Not a number of months. Is that right?
Correct.
Yes, and I would have imagined that when you became aware that now this was all in the newspapers, you knew, or knowing that this, what you had said was not true, you would have taken steps to correct this. Did you take any steps to correct this?
I did, Chair. When I was called by Nick Hawk, I categorically stated that none of the three ever gave me any instructions. Maybe my fault, which again I think I will still act in this consistently with, is that I've never ascribed to playing into public gallery through the media. I've never ever granted any interview to any media people on this saga or on any other matter at that. I do not believe in doing my official business through the media. And since there were official structures that were set up to deal with the matter, I did set the record straight, both in the NICOC as well as in the extended NICOC meetings, as well as in the Committee of the Director Generals. In all three, I did not mince my words in stating categorically that they did not give me any instructions, the three executives in question.
Did you admit to them that it was true that you had made these statements, but that you were not being truthful when you made these statements?
Chairperson, again, I don't remember the exact question. I'll have to go back to them. They could have asked a question of saying, did you get instruction from the president? And the answer was no. But I mean, the line of questioning now is different. And I do have, I'm sure also the commission has a copy of the questions that I was asked and the answers that I provided. And if I remember from looking at some of them in this last week,
yes,
I think the questions were like, did the president instruct you to do this? Or did anybody in the presidency instruct you to do this? You know, there were even follow-up questions.
Yes.
And then I had to provide appropriate answers. But had the questions been phrased the way that we have phrased it now, I would have obviously provided answers that talk to the question, the nature and the form of the questions.
Well, it is possible that they might not have asked you the question whether you had made those statements, and only asked you whether you did get instructions.
Correct.
But do you not think as you sit there now, that even if they had simply asked you, did you get instructions, knowing that you had falsely made those statements about those three officials, the president and the two ministers, did you not think it was important that you take them into your confidence and say, it is true that this is what I said, but it was, I was being untruthful. The president and the ministers had no role in this, as far as I know.
No, Chairperson, is that maybe if we were sitting in a format of this nature, or even in a room having a discussion, a question and answer session, maybe that might have happened, but because when I was called into the meeting, I was not told. I was going there under the pretext that I was only going to be meeting one person, which is Mr. Lomo. But when I got there, as I indicated, there were a number of people, and I asked the legal status, and I felt that my rights would be violated if I do not exercise my right to legal representation. And they took a decision then that they will send me the questions in writing, and also then provided answers in writing. So I was only responding to the specific questions that they actually put down on me. And also, having consulted my legal counsel just advised that try to answer the questions that you've been asked, and that's what I did, Chair.
And did you ever communicate either to the then president and the two ministers any apology that for using their names falsely the way you had? Did you ever communicate to and make any communication to say, I know that the newspapers are saying this, that I made statements that you had a role to play, and I want to admit that I did make those statements, but I was untruthful, and I apologize to you for whatever wrong I've done, because now your names are being mentioned in the media as people who had a role in the landing of this aircraft. Did you, over the years, over the past 6 years, did you ever do anything like that?
Chair, I do not recall, and of course I might have missed it, partly because there's a time when I wasn't necessarily attached to reading the newspapers for a number of reasons. But I do not recall that there was specific reference to Minister Martins giving me instructions. There was reference, there was reference to Mr. Martins' meeting that was held at Ortambo.
Yes.
And equally also on Minister Mapisa-Nqakula. And as regards, yes, there were articles regarding the president himself.
Yes.
And the answer is no, I did not go back to him out of shame, because I was too ashamed to even face him, understanding the gravity of what I had done. And therefore, I couldn't get myself to look him in the eye and said, I'm sorry, I had wrongfully used your name to put pressure on the officials to process the flight clearance application. And that's basically the truth. I was ashamed, like I am ashamed now. I mean, although I'm admitting the guilt, but it doesn't make me feel good or any better.
At the disciplinary hearing, you also had to deal with the situation of the statements you had made about the president and the two ministers. Is that correct? You had to, the discussion included that?
Not in the same context, Chair. If I remember, I think, again, yeah, it's a long time that it happened. I may not recollect everything, but I think the context of the two ministers was about, one with Minister Ben Martins was about the meeting we had at the airport. If I remember well again, I don't remember very well. I will have to look at the report if it's here so that I can check my memory. Because although, yes, the documents are all given to me and my legal counsel, I must admit I did not read all of them. because I just couldn't read more than so many pages on my own. I mean, I focus on some of the areas. I might have left out one which is of interest right now to the chair. So I'll have to go back to it and look at it.
Well, we'll take the tea break now, but part of an earlier question that I think Ms. Norman was asking amounts to this. The landing of this aircraft at Waterkloof was something that was talked about in the country for a long time. Mr. Ramatloti gave evidence here earlier this year. I can't put words into his mouth, but whatever he said, I understood to mean something like that aircraft landed at Waterkloof was an abomination. Those are my words, not his, but my understanding of what he was saying. And my understanding he was saying, or is that he was saying, as a nation we were ashamed that this could happen. Now, that landing was such a big issue in the country, and it went on for a long time. One would think that knowing what role you had played in regard to the landing, knowing that you had been charged with allegations relating to it at work, and you had pleaded guilty, and the issue of your using these names was mentioned there as well. How could you forget that indeed you had used these names wrongly or falsely when you spoke yesterday, when you gave evidence yesterday? I think one of the questions she put amounted to saying, how is it possible that having been involved in something so big, you would forget that you did actually use these names and made these statements?
Well, Chair, first of all, I can only say that I'm human like everybody else is. There are certain things that are pleasant memories that you want to linger on for the rest of your life. And there are some that you want to forget and close the door on them and never ever get back to them in your life. So I have gone through that process in my life of the latter. And there are many things related particularly to that whole process. My family, everything that happened to me, my family in particular, and my children in particular, that I would like to completely forget. So we tried to find, to go through therapy for me, my wife, and my children in particular, to try and forget about some of these things. So I think maybe it's just the refusal of the memory bank to deal with some of these realities, because they do not bring anything but unnecessary pain to me, my wife, and my children.
I think let's take the tea adjournment,
Yes,
and then we will, it's 20 past,
Yes.
we will resume at 25 to 12.
Thank you, Chair.
We adjourn.
All right.
with the last sentence at the bottom of page 32. The chairperson's ruling is the one to which Ms. Norman just referred you to.
Yeah.
Yes. That sentence, the last sentence, they says the employee, and then it goes on page 33 and says, admitted that he betrayed the trust that the employer entrusted in him by assigning such crucial responsibilities to him. The nation look upon members of cabinet under the leadership of the president for guidance and sound leadership, particularly on matters of national interest by virtue of their positions and authority. The mention of their names is therefore associated with authority. The employee admitted that he misrepresented the facts in order to secure an illegal landing. This is clearly a dismissible offense. You see that part which I've just read?
Yes, I do, Chair.
I draw attention to that last sentence, not the last, the second last sentence, which says the employee admitted that he misrepresented the facts in order to secure an illegal landing. I take it that the chairperson of the disciplinary inquiry, in recording that this is what you had admitted, got that right. Is that correct?
Chair, my understanding was that in that she said, we debated that, and then said by saying that, Chair, because the fact that I told Mr. Nchisi that there are 4 to 5 ministers was not misrepresentation for me. I was told so by the High Commissioner of India, so I had no reason to dispute it. So I communicated what I had been told, which turned out not to be accurate. And the argument is, did I misrepresent, or was I given wrong information upon which I then acted? So we debated that for a very long time, but at the end of the day, Chair, I am not in control of writing the final report, and she is, and she was expressing her own views,
Yes.
which even now I do not necessarily contend were accurate, because some of the things that I did, which I admitted, and I admit also in this commission, for example, exerting pressure on the officials to process the application speedily. I accept that responsibility.
Yes. No, I think the sentence to which I've drawn your attention, where it says the employee admitted that he misrepresented the facts in order to secure an illegal landing. I think the facts that the chairperson of the hearing who is writing there is talking about must be your mention of the president's name and mention of the 2 ministers, because she refers to that earlier in the paragraph. So I just want to confirm that whether I can accept that one of the things that you admitted in the disciplinary hearing before the chairperson of the disciplinary hearing is that you had used those 3 names wrongly. You had mentioned them in order to put pressure on the officials of the Department of Defense.
Yes, I did admit that in the internal disciplinary process.
Yes.
And I've also admitted it in this commission that it was wrongful
Yes.
use of such names.
Yes. No, that's fine. The reason why I wanted to confirm that, because earlier on, you will recall, I asked a question which sought to understand which facts you admitted and which facts you did not admit in the disciplinary inquiry. So the context here is that from what you have said at the meeting that you talked about, where you were given questions and you answered, they asked you whether the president ever gave instructions or knew about the landing. You said no, but you were not asked, you, as I understand it, whether you had made the statement about either the president or the other ministers.
Correct.
But what we do now know, at least, is that in the disciplinary inquiry, you also admitted that you had wrongly used those names.
Correct.
Yes. Okay.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Chair. Just referencing paragraph 2.1.15, which we are dealing with, of FF1, to the clearance that appears in Exhibit FF4.
Are we looking at FF1 or FF4?
FF1,
Yeah.
Ambassador, page, if you go to page 11, that's okay.
Right.
And then you just leave that open, and then you take FF4, and then page 193. Thank you. And then in FF1, as you can see, the first sentence says it was on the 9th of April 2013 when you called.
Sorry, you
I beg your pardon,
are
Chair. I'm
way
going too
ahead
fast.
of me.
I
You
beg
want
your
us
pardon, Chair. To look at FF1, Chair,
At what page?
at page 11.
I've got that.
Thank you. And then FF4, Chair, which is the Board of Inquiry bundle.
What page?
Page 193, Chair.
Yes.
Thank you. I just want to highlight that the date of the call to Major Nchisi appears to be the same date that the external clearance was issued, which is the 9th of April 2013. Do you see that, Ambassador?
Yes, I do.
Yes. And then the other dates, they follow in RSA4, but the one that's relevant for our purposes, which deals with the main aircraft, is the one that appears at page 193.
I'm struggling to see
The date,
where that date is.
The date is right on top, just below or next to where the
9 April 2013.
That's correct,
And
yes.
under the address, beneath the address, I can see that.
That's correct. That's the date. Yes.
Yes.
And then Chair will find then the signature of Lieutenant Colonel Van Zyl at the end. We did deal with this with
Yes.
one of the generals that testified.
Yes.
Yes, thank you. I just wanted to close that to show that on the same day that the call was made, then the same day the clearance was issued.
Was
Was
done.
issued. Yes, thank you, Chair.
Yes, okay.
Thank you. And then, if we may now just...
Well, while you are doing that, let me just confirm,
Yes.
Ambassador. It may be understood that maybe so far the conversation that we have been talking about that you had, where you mentioned the name of the president and the two ministers, may have been only the conversation that you had with Warrant Officer Nchisi. I just want to confirm whether you also told Colonel Anderson, you mentioned these names in the same way when you had a conversation, a telephone conversation with Colonel Anderson at any particular stage, whether recorded or not recorded.
Although I do not recall whether I might have used all the three names, but I know that we definitely did, during the discussion, I think the word, the use of the name of the president might have come up. Again,
Yes.
I am saying, if I could say it to Ms. Nchisi, probably I would have said it as well to Colonel Anderson, because we had an even more matured and developed professional working relationship, having worked together for 2.5 years, and I had not done so with Ms. Nchisi.
Yes, I think in the recorded conversation that you appear to have had with Colonel Anderson, in the recorded conversation that Colonel Anderson appears to have had with Warrant Officer Nchisi, I think she does say that you told her about number one, or the president. Did you hear that part in the recorded conversations?
I did hear her making reference to number one. I'm not sure whether she said I told her or she was just saying that this is a very sensitive matter. I'm not sure how to say it because number one is also aware of this or something like that. But yes, she did make reference to number one.
Yes. She might not have said she got that from you.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to find out whether that would help in terms of your memory to say, no, I think I did say it. If she says she got it from you, you may be right. Maybe she doesn't say she got that from you.
Correct, Chair. I mean, and again, by admission, I want to state categorically that if I could say it like that to Ms. Nchisi,
Yes.
then the probability that I did say it to Colonel Anderson is extremely high.
Yes. Of course, the question that arises out of the evidence that you have given this morning in regard to you putting pressure on officials of the Department of Defense is why you would have sought to resort to these measures of mentioning the president's name, mentioning the ministers' names, to put pressure on them just to process the request for clearance, irrespective of whether they ultimately turned it down or not.
Chair, I think the mere fact that, as I said earlier, my intuition told me that the Gupta family might be involved in this. And also, what confused things was that even the High Commissioner's name was also a Gupta, albeit not related. One, I wanted them to process it so that they could give an answer saying yes or no. But like I said, for me to use the names of the principals was fundamentally to make them to move at lightning speed. And as indicated that it was also issued on the same day. And again, it could have been declined on the same day if it didn't meet the merits, and also if the systems within the Department of Defense themselves had also not collapsed, because clearly there is evidence that, as was presented by the General Mkwebi, that I think their systems also needed to be checked up because they had checks and balances which didn't seem to work.
But what was in it for you in this whole thing? Why would you resort to untruthfully mentioning certain people's names in order to put pressure on officials about something that really had nothing to do other than that you have done your part by passing on the request to the Department of Defense? Why couldn't you simply say to whoever may have been putting pressure on you to say the Defense Department is not dealing with these things expeditiously? Why was it not enough for you to say, look, I have no control of on their processes. We have done our part, and all I can say is ask them to please attend to it expeditiously. More than that, I can't do.
Well, Chair, to answer the first part, there was nothing in it for me at all. Two, why did I push? I mean, I indicated when I started my testimony that one of my core responsibilities was servicing strategic bilateral relations with all the diplomatic missions in South Africa. And India being one of the strategic countries in that we are part of IBSA together, part of BRICS together as well, I think I had an interest to appease him. And besides, we had also built a personal relationship over time because I was interacting with all the ambassadors, whether on their national days or sometimes just for lunches and things like that. So that really was fundamentally the reason why I wanted to, I think, to appear to him to be the most effective guy who can make things happen. And again, I admit, without any reservations, that it was a wrongful act on my side, like I indicated.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. And just as a follow-up on Chair's question, was it also not because you didn't want this clearance to be declined? Because otherwise, why use those names?
Yes, you can say that because, like I said, mine was to make sure that I'm seen as well by the High Commissioner Ambassador of India to be a man who can get things to happen. And also, shortly before, I think after that, we were going to be having a BRICS summit, so I was really trying to appease him to the best of my ability.
Yes, thank you. And then the aircraft lands at Waterkloof.
Well, maybe before it lands. Before it lands.
Yeah.
I understand the part which you have just said now, Ambassador, that, look, you had a certain relationship with the Embassy of India. The two countries have a special relationship. And from your side, you wanted to be seen as somebody who could get things to happen. But the question that Ms. Norman asked you, namely, is it not true that you also wanted the result of the request for clearance to be positive? Your answer was, as I've understood correctly, yes, that could happen as well. Is that correct? Or did I misunderstand?
Working on the assumption that the Indian High Commission had submitted all the relevant documentation since not long before that incident, they had received a head of state through the same process. I assumed that they done properly, and of course I had no reason to believe that it wasn't going to be granted. And all I wanted was to, I felt it was just incompetence on the side of the officials, and that's why I was pushing them to actually do the processing. And yes, of course, I was hopeful that it will be approved because I was under the assumption that all was kosher in terms of the documentation that had to be submitted.
Well, the part that I wanted to draw attention to is that my understanding of your evidence yesterday, and I think, and it may be that earlier today as well at some stage, your evidence, as I understood it, seemed to be to the effect that all you wanted was that they should, the Department of Defense should process the request for clearance. What the outcome was neither here nor there for you. You just wanted that they should process the clearance, and but I seem to understand what you have said to be, yes, you wanted the outcome to be a positive one as well. So you're getting a chance to just tell me if I've misunderstood anything.
Chair, I was pushing so that they would process the application for the flight clearance. And of course, I do understand, like in any other government department, there are internal processes. But of course, I was hopeful that it will be granted because it had been granted a few months earlier. And I had no reason to suspect that it would not be granted, but was just, in my head, it was just the assumption that there's just some administrative incompetence by the officials who either were just putting it somewhere there and not really processing it at all. And yes, to bring about the degree of urgency, I wrongfully then dropped the names of the principals. But again, I can drop the name of the principal, but if the internal processes were followed properly and they decide, sorry, we cannot grant, that will not really have had any direct effect or bearing on the issue because the process will have stopped it from being processed positively, and put it that way.
What would you say to the proposition that mentioning the president's names and those ministers to Warrant Officer Jesse and maybe to Colonel Anderson as well, was meant to improve, if not guarantee, but at least improve the prospects that the outcome would be an approval.
I will say,
And not that not that you used those names just to have the process expedited irrespective of the outcome.
I would have argued, Chair, that mine was to ensure that there was going to be an efficient attention to the process itself, with the full appreciation that there were internal processes to be followed, which could have led in either the acceptance or the decline of the application. And yes, like I indicated, I was hopeful that it will be issued so that the Indian High Commissioner or Ambassador will also see that I had actually acted on the matter expediently to make sure that it's dealt with.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Ms.
Chair.
Norman?
Thank you, Chair. There's just I've got this nagging feeling, which is something that I think I must just deal with you, Ambassador. Because every time you give an answer to the Chair's questions, you say, of course, there were internal processes. Had people followed internal processes, then maybe this would not have happened. But I just want to understand, at what point did you realize that a wedding party for the Gupta family was going to be the persons that were going to be landing at Waterkloof? I just want to understand in terms of the timeline.
When the High Commissioner told me, he also indicated that he didn't lie. He said there are people coming for the wedding, and in that same plane there will also be ministers. But like I indicated in my earlier testimony, in the meeting also at our Tambo, it was stated categorically that there are actually going to be people coming for the wedding, but there will be ministers. So in terms of the timeline, and also my intuition, you can actually argue that I learned about it from the first meeting that was held at our Tambo International Airport.
Yes. And then in your assessment, then you knew that there were going to be ministers and there was going to be a wedding party. Did you regard that as an aircraft that could land at the Waterkloof base?
I do not have the right to decide whether an airport can land or not at the Waterkloof Air Force Base. I have indicated that there have been some instances where private planes have landed there. But again, it's not in my jurisdiction to decide whether, it wasn't in my mandate to decide if a private plane or not cannot land, because as was stated also by the people from defense, that under certain circumstances, they do consider private planes to land there, but it's not me who can make that decision.
Yes, okay, yeah, you're quite right. You've already indicated that. But just tell the Chair, if then all of this had to deal with defense, defense had to clear this, why was it necessary for you to call Mr. Makila?
I think I indicated that one of the principal mandate for the Chief of State Protocol is the maintenance of cordial bilateral relationships by servicing every single diplomatic mission in South Africa. And anytime when they have a problem, they come, you are the first point of call. And also if they are creating a problem, you are the first one who demarches them to come and attend to it. So the Indian High Commissioner called me because that is the protocol routine that they will have to follow, and that's why I called Mr. Machi.
No, but what was expected from DECO? When that call was made, what was expected from DECO, and why is it that you thought that you had to call Mr. Makila to deal with the process?
I'm not sure, maybe I'm failing to express this, Madam, but what's expected from the Chief of Protocol is to follow up and establish if there is a problem, and if so, what the problem is. And I made an example also yesterday that if somebody parks in front of the embassy all the time, what's expected of me is to call the diplomatic police and said, please, can you attend to that matter and give me an update once you've done so that I can make sure that I can confirm with the ambassador in question. So the role of protocol basically is to make sure that whenever a diplomatic mission has a problem and that he attends to it, because some of these small nuisances can actually create unnecessary political tensions between two countries. So every time they have a problem, they will call the Chief of Protocol.
Yes. No, I understand that. But what I wanted to understand, you must remember you were dealing with the processes yesterday and today. You are saying that I wanted to say to them, look, just check, why is this process not moving? You know, what are the problems? But I want to understand, at what point then did you say, DECO has done what it's supposed to do, this has got nothing to do with us anymore, and we all walk away? At what point did you reach did you at all reach that stage, or did you continue to make this whole flight issue a part of the state protocol matter?
No. After I'd spoken to Ms. Nchisi, I called the High Commissioner of India and I told him that I've spoken to Defense and they've promised me that they are looking into the processing of your application and that they apparently will be getting in touch with the military attaché. I'm sure the matter will be attended to. However, if you're not happy, please get back to me. And then he called me, I think a day or two later, and said, I forgot to tell you, my brother, thank you very much, we've got the flight clearance issued.
Yes.
And that was, basically that was the end of dealing with it.
And then, so I take it that thereafter you never had any dealings with this aircraft?
I did not have any dealings with the facilitation process at all.
Okay. Did you go to Waterkloof on the date when this aircraft landed?
Yes, I did.
Okay. What were the reasons for you to go there?
I got a call from the Indian High Commissioner saying, and also from Ken Anderson, if I'm not mistaken, saying that the plane has landed, and I had completely forgotten about it. And I was actually in the golf course, and I just had to stop playing golf and go and see what was happening there. And when I got there, I saw there were many cars, and many people had left already from what I was told. But it was late when I already got there.
Yes. And did you attend the wedding?
No, I did not.
Okay. Were you invited?
Yes, I was.
Yes. Then, do you have any, or even at that time, that is in 2013, around May or April, did you have any relations with the members of the Gupta family, as in being friends, as visiting each other?
I knew them because they attended some of the functions that the president hosted. For example, the State of the Nation address. There used to be a traditional banquet dinner afterwards, and the president would invite a number of guests from military veterans to family friends or businesses. And my job, of course, is to make sure that I take care of all the guests of the president as part of my protocol expectations.
Then, so now that your memory has been refreshed by the audio, I take it that when you went through the report where it deals with your interactions with Colonel Anderson, your interactions with Warrant Officer Nchisi, you accept those as they are?
Correct.
Yes, thank you.
Can I just take you back, Ambassador, to Exhibit FF3? That's the volume that has got your disciplinary hearing documents. If you go to page 27, that is the chairperson's ruling there. Excuse me. It says at paragraph 4, are you there?
Yeah.
Yes. It says at paragraph 4 that the parties asked for the adjournment of the proceedings in order to deliberate among themselves on the point raised by the employee. I think the point you had raised was that the charges were split, if I understand correctly. And then in paragraph 5 it says, when the matter resumed, the employee informed me that he is ready to plead to the charges as captured above, with the exclusion of the facts and evidence in support of the charges. That's part of what you emphasized, I think. And then in paragraph 6, it says the employee pleaded guilty to all 3 charges. Then the chairperson says, I went through each charge in order to satisfy myself that the employee understand the elements of each of the charges. The employee persisted with his guilty plea on each charge. You understand that?
Correct.
Have you got any query with what the chairperson recorded there, particularly in paragraph 6?
No, I do not, except to indicate that earlier on when the chair asked me, I did indicate that the heading of the charges itself, I agreed with that. And when I talk about the facts, I talk about the sub-bullet points, but the actual thematic charges, I had
Yes.
agreed with that, and where we had differed
Yes.
is in some of the
factors.
points under those charges.
Yes, yes. I think there was another part which I wanted to draw your attention to. Okay, no, I think I may have missed it now. If I see it again, we'll talk about it.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. You may proceed.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Ambassador, there is also Exhibit FF2B. You have mentioned to the chairperson that you were given a list of questions and you answered those questions. This is part of the bundles that were received from the public protector. Exhibit FF2B, Chair. It will be in the
Double F2B.
double F2B, yes, Chair.
What page?
Thank you. Page 440, Chair. They've started with the answers at page 435, but I just want the Ambassador to identify that these are, in fact, the questions that he was referring to. At page 440, there are questions for Ambassador Bruce Koloane. Are you there, Ambassador?
I'm trying to get there.
All right, so page 440.
Yes, I'm there now, ma'am.
Thank you. Are those the questions at page 440, 441 that you were referring the chairperson to?
Yes, I think they are.
Yes. So you received these from the DGs because it's got, you've got, when you responded at page 435, you mentioned Ms. Sindane.
At
If you-
page 4?
435, when you were dealing with your responses dated 14 May.
Is it in the same document?
Same,
45?
yes. 435.
Yeah.
Okay. You've got attention TN Sindane, Director General Justice and Constitutional Development. Yes. So these are the responses that you gave to those questions.
Correct.
Yes. Sorry, I just want. Just a minute, Chair. I'm sorry, I just want to get this
Yes.
correct. 20. And you were asked a question, if you go to page 440,
Yeah.
Chair, 440, if I may just direct your attention
Yes.
to page 20.
Excuse me.
Sorry, Chair, a note has just been brought to my attention that Mr. Koloane's legal representatives are complaining that they did not get the full public protector's report. But may I just establish whether these questions were finished?
Yeah, just talk to counsel.
Yes.
The two of you can talk and see if you can sort it out. Yeah.
Yes, yes. Just the
You can
question
just
that
talk
We're
here
not complaining at this stage. I just pointed it out.
that you didn't get the full
If
report.
something arises and I feel I need
Yes.
to object, I
Okay.
just noted my little friend was a bit animated when I objected earlier.
Yeah, okay.
So,
No, that's all right.
No, thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you. Thank you. The question was asked, who stated that the ministers would be arriving? That's at paragraph 20 of that question, at page 440. And then the question was, I take it that you had answered in the same format of the questions, is that correct?
Yeah, the answer was the Indian High Commission.
Yes, all right. And then you asked, for example, let's take the one question. And then you asked at paragraph 26, was Ambassador Koloane aware that Airbus A330 was given clearance to land? And then your answer to that?
I said yes.
Yes. Thank you. And then paragraph 28. You asked who at the Indian High Commission asked Ambassador Koloane for processing assistance. What was the ambassador's response? What did Ambassador Koloane understand the request to mean? And then what was your response to that question?
The number 2 and the 28, eh?
Yes, yes.
The number 2, and I agreed that I will follow up to check what the cause of the delay was. I understood the request to mean exactly what it meant. Check with relevant authorities.
Yes. Who is number 2 that you're referring to there?
The deputy, the number 2 in charge in the embassy.
Yes. That would be the Indian embassy?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes. And then there's question 30. On all clearances, the reason given is delegation. Why did departmental officials get the impression it was an official delegation? And then what was your answer to that question?
I am not sure I get the question. However, the State Protocol has the responsibility to facilitate arrival for ministers, heads of state and government, and eminent persons, even if they're in a country for private visits.
Yes. So is it correct that on this, on these questions, I would imagine, because then you were not asked, you did not volunteer any information other than to simply respond to the questions that were put to you?
I'm not sure whether I was supposed to volunteer anything, ma'am, but I thought the instructions were clear to me. They were just saying, we're going to send you questions, and can you please provide an accurate response to all these questions? So I just provided responses to the questions themselves that were answered.
Yes. And your questions are dated 14 May 2013, and the report, that is FF1, the date on the report is 17 May 2013.
Can you say that again, ma'am?
So your report, that is your answers to the
Yeah.
questions. Those answers are dated 14 May 2013.
Right.
Yes. And the report that Ms. Sindane testified to is dated the 17th of May 2013.
Correct.
Yes. So I'm going back to what you testified to yesterday, that you were not really given a hearing because before you left a particular meeting, you had Minister Khatebe making announcements on the findings.
I can help clarify that
Yes.
if it will please the chair.
Yes.
What I said is as follows. I was invited, I submitted the answers to them in writing. And then I was invited to a subsequent meeting by the same team of ministers, DGs, to come and provide clarity on some of the answers that I had provided. And I went to that meeting to provide clarity. But when I walked out of that meeting, after providing clarity, Minister Jeff Khatebe was already reading the report that had been compiled. So I was wondering whether it was an exercise in futility to ask me to come and provide clarity on the answers. When walking out, the minister was already reading the report.
Yes.
And secondly, I also said, if it will also help, please, the chair, to mention this, that I said there were 4 members, according to what Ms. Sindane herself said, who constituted the JCPS team. And I said that Mr. Moyane never sat in any of the meetings, so I wasn't sure whether that did not in any way prejudice me that I was not given a chance to sit with them. But secondly, the answers I gave were not to the JCPS team, although she was a member of the bigger team, but the JCPS was a properly constituted body of 4 people. I would have expected that under normal circumstances, they will also call the people and say, according to the report received from the DGs, this is what is being said. Do you have anything to say? Or this is is what somebody else says which contravene or contradicts your testimony, do you have anything to say on that? Or saying that exercise was never done. And I felt that in terms of the rules of procedure, one would have expected that that's what they would have done. Again, it's an assumption. Maybe they were told only take reports from others and don't bother to cross or to engage with them. I don't know. But I'm saying, I was just stating a fact for the record that I never once got subjected to, in front of the team of the 4 people who were members of the cluster. I coincidentally interacted with them through other structures, except, of course, for Mr. Tomoyan.
Yes, but you would agree that this was interaction between you and JCPS team members, Ms. Sindani in particular. You were given questions.
Chair, I wouldn't say JCPS members because that was a NICOC, it was an extended NICOC team, so I do not want to conflate the extended NICOC team with JCPS because she stated categorically that the JCPS team was chosen by ministers and that those were 4 people only. So I'm not sure, therefore, how to relate to what you are suggesting, Madam.
What I'm saying is there was a point when Ms. Sindane, whom we know was part of the JCPS cluster investigators, where she had given you a list of questions and you responded to that list of questions.
I think maybe there must be context that's put into this because it presupposes that the JCPS cluster, after meeting through the extended NICOC meeting, then went on its own to set up the questions. The questions were raised, all these questions were raised with me initially verbally in that extended meeting. I then asked what was the legal status of the meeting because I could see the pattern of the questions. That was not in the JCPS cluster, but it was in the extended NICOC meeting. And then they promised that they will give me those questions in writing. They could have asked her to then do that, but I'm saying these are the questions which had emanated or which came up directly in the interaction between myself and the extended NICOC cluster meeting.
Okay. But what is correct is that whoever gave you the questions, you responded to those questions.
That is correct.
Yes, thank you. And in those questions, you were dealing with the one issue, which is the facilitation of the landing of the Waterkloof, at the Waterkloof base.
I was just dealing with the questions that had been asked.
Yes,
Yeah.
and those questions related to that incident.
No, it's not, because it also talks about the arrival phase.
No, but arrival of what, say?
I'm saying that if you look at the questions and the answers, it's got questions which are pre-arrival
Yes.
and pre-arrival phase, and then it's got questions which says arrival phase as well.
Yes, but that's the arrival of the aircraft at
Correct.
Waterkloof.
So not only the pre-arrival, but it was the pre-arrival as well as the arrival phase.
Yes, but the incident is one, is that correct? It deals with the...
Arrival of the aircraft, yeah.
That's correct. Thank you. Okay. Then, thank you. If you could just take that away. Thank you, Chair. I think we've dealt with the questions on the matters that we wish to raise with the witness, but there's one remaining issue. The audio transcript has not yet formed part of the evidence before you, and we were hoping that we would ask for leave to play the 5-minute audio which relates to Ambassador Koloane, because the other 22 minutes there is certain conversations there, but we could listen to both because Major Ntrisi is present, and the bulk of what is contained in the second audio relates to Major Ntrisi.
I'm not sure what you are saying. I expect that the recordings that we've got, which Ambassador Koloane and his legal team have listened to, that they would be played. Is there a problem with that?
No, Chair, that is what I'm requesting.
Yes, let's play that.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Chair.
You're speaking to Ambassador Koloane, the Chief of the Protocol.
I think it's too loud.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. I can hear you cutting, sir. Hello? Yes, can you hear me now? Yes, I can hear you now. Okay. I'm saying I'm calling to follow up on this last clearance request by the Indians for, I think, 29 percent.
I'm sorry.
Sorry, Chair, I think it's too loud.
Yeah, it might be too loud, but we need to also indicate which conversation we are
It is.
starting with,
Yes, thank
which
you.
one, so that everybody knows
Thank
who
you.
are the participants in the conversations.
Thank you, Chair.
But do you need a 5 minutes adjournment to try and get the right level of volume,
Thank you, Chair. That, we would appreciate
which will
that.
make it
Audible.
properly audible?
Yes, Chair. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
We are going to adjourn for about 5 minutes to allow the legal team and technicians to find the right level of the volume so that we can hear the recording. We adjourn. Foreign Office and GC, Match and GC, is that correct?
That's correct, Chair.
Okay, all right.
Thank you.
I'm good. Can I have a complaint, sir? My brother, you are speaking to Ambassador Koloane, the Chief of the Protocol. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. I can't hear you cutting, sir. Hello? Yes, can you hear me now? Yes, I can hear you now. Okay. I'm saying I'm calling to follow up on this last clearance request by the Indians for, I think, 29th or so of this month. Just hold on, sir. Good afternoon, speaking. Hello? Hello, sir. Yeah, this is Ambassador Koloane. Yes, you're speaking to Tabo. Tabo, good and all right, man. No, but I'm calling to follow up on the request by the Indians for their clearance to let the Waterkloof for the 29th.
Oh, okay, the phone is continuously not engaged, but it was ringing.
No, we have a head of mission consultant with all our ambassadors, so I was making presentations when my phone was
okay. You know, I'm following the Captain Saji, because the Waterkloof, he only accommodate head of state, nama deputy. So at the end again, I was thinking you to give prime minister, give minister fella.
Yeah, no, there are I think about 4 or 5 ministers on board, né?
Yes.
And the reason why we made that request, you know, I do understand for facts what you're saying.
Yeah.
But we were, I was called, can you hear me?
Yes, I do, sir.
Yeah, no, I was called by the Minister of Transport, Minister Ben Martin.
Yes.
Into a meeting wherein he indicated that he had been given instructions by the President to assist these people with this thing. So we explored first the option of lending the Waterkloof. The people that are actually doing this is the Gupta family. I will just have your correct. Okay. So we explored the possibility of a Waterkloof, fresh OR camp. But the difficulty just doesn't work.
Yes.
So I believe then that they then spoke to the Gupta, then spoke to Minister.
Yes.
Who indicated that she would have no objection.
All right.
So what then happened subsequent to that is that I was then called into a meeting wherein Minister of Transport, the CEO of the AXA, myself and the Guptas were in the same meeting.
Yes.
Wherein we were told to assist. It's actually a wedding.
Yes.
That the people are going to be attending, which will be held in some city.
Okay.
So normally, as you would know, I would not necessarily make any request for any minister.
Yes, I understand, sir.
Because I deal with this daily, but you know, this is a unique case, so that's why I thought we call it to give you the best background.
Okay. So what I'm requesting from you, sir, there is something that's written that I can assure it, because Waterkloof will demand that letter. If maybe you have a note that the whole thing is written down so that I'll be able to give to Waterkloof, because Waterkloof won't allow me to allow them to land at Waterkloof. But that I've already said, so it's quite understandable. Can you give me down so that I'll be able to bring to Waterkloof?
The challenge is that I can't put all the detail I'm giving you in writing.
Yes.
As you know, for all other reasons. But tell me, who at Waterkloof, who is in charge of Waterkloof?
Colonel Anderson.
Colonel Anderson?
Yes.
You know, these people have actually gone to meet with Colonel Anderson. The lady, no?
Yes, the lady.
Yeah. She's actually showed them around the whole area.
Okay.
So she's somewhat aware.
Oh.
These people went to meet her, I think last week, Friday or Thursday.
Okay, you know what I'm going to do, sir? It's going to be easy. I'm going to phone her to confirm that he is aware with the situation of Indian delegates. If says she's fine, she's okay.
Of the Indian delegate, of the Indian that came to see her,
yes,
regarding the landing of the plane, to let a few ministers on board who are coming to attend the Gupta family wedding.
Yes, but if everything is under the control, sir, we'll continue with the current. But I'll speak to her now to confirm that he's happy with it.
My brother, do so and then call me back.
Okay, sir, I'll do that, sir.
Thanks.
I'll phone on your cell phone, is it fine?
Yeah, you can call the phone, yeah.
Okay, no, thanks, sir.
Okay, then.
Thank you, Chair.
Is that the end of the
That-
conversation?
Yes, that's the
between
end of the
two?
conversation. That is correct, Chair.
Yes, okay.
And then the second conversation also it relates to Major Nchisi. And I think there is a bit between Major Nchisi and Ambassador Koloane, but on a very limited issue. If you could continue with playing number 7.
Kumbalan listening to Warrant Officer QC from Command Post. May I speak to Colonel Anderson?
Stand by for me, let me just check.
All right.
Hello?
Hello.
Okay, I'm going to phone you. Okay, I'm going to phone you. I'm going to phone you.
Stand up, Manogi Mountain. HQ. No, I can. It will only be Waterkloof fell.
Is it? Oh,
Yeah.
now it's really. Get off phone it.
Yeah, give her a number high.
I can know this the number.
This one is the number. And the next to the number must be a cell phone.
No, the extension is the office.
Oh. Okay, Mamela hai. Kuba phone you for flight clearance.
I phone you over flight clearance.
Yeah, in connection with Indian delegates.
Oh, okay.
Yes, there are.
But I'm
Yeah, right, Mama. By 217. Want to confirm some clarities.
Oh, okay then.
Thanks, sir.
Okay, bye.
Okay.
Is that the end of one?
Yes, that one, sorry, Chair, could you just put a hold? Thank you. Chair, that was an interaction between Major Nchisi and an assistant to Colonel Anderson.
Okay.
He was requesting to speak to Colonel Anderson on that, but
Yes.
couldn't. Yes, thank you.
Okay, the next
Thank you.
one will be who and who?
The next one, Chair, I hope I have my sequence correct. I think it is going to be between Major Nchisi and Colonel Anderson because she returned then the call.
Yes,
Thank you.
okay.
Ramakani, is your first name Sabu?
Nope.
Who's Sabu?
Sergeant Major Tisi.
How could she say no to the ambassador? The chief director State Protocol.
We said no.
Why?
No, I didn't say that. Speak to the warrant.
Let me speak to the warrant.
Yes, sir.
G'day, Warren.
Warren, how are you?
I'm okay, and you, madam?
Fine, thank you. Is your first name Sabu?
Yes, ma'am.
The ambassador just called me.
Yes.
The chief director State Protocol, you said no to him.
No, I said to them, we want to confirm who's the senior person on
It's
board.
a minister.
Yes, they said it's a minister. Said, will you please have something written down so that we can convey to you to Waterkloof that you can allow the minister to land to Waterkloof?
Okay, so you want something from them?
Yes. But now, I understand that you spoke to the, I think it's ambassador, yes.
Yeah,
Yes,
it's Ambassador Koloane.
yes, he says to me that you had a meeting before
Yes,
with them.
Yes.
So are they allowed to lend the memo or
yes,
not?
my dear, they are.
Okay, the 217.
Yeah.
Oh, another thing I just want to confirm, ma'am.
Listen, let me say something to you.
Yes.
Confidentiality.
Yes.
He's now just mentioned this. This is, I must be very careful. This is our number one knows about this.
Yeah, he explained that to me, ma'am.
Okay.
Yes.
So it's political. It's a political.
Yes. That's why now I said, no, let me confirm with you first.
No, I think you can allow them. I will phone the ambassador back.
Okay, ma'am.
All right.
But confirm,
I'll
ma'am.
tell the ambassador, they must just follow the procedures, but I must just tell you who's the senior minister.
Yes.
Minister from something plus 10.
Yes. But
Okay.
confirm, ma'am, according to your policy that side, do you take head of state and the deputy or
Head of state and ministers.
head of state and ministers?
Yeah, you see, it depends on what type of visit it is.
Yes.
If it's an official state visit,
Yes.
then it can be a minister.
Yes.
This is a private visit.
Yes, I understand.
If Dirko approves of the visit.
Yes.
Because we liaise with DIRCO, and if DIRCO approves the visit,
Yes.
then it's not a problem.
Okay, that's fine. If you are happy, ma'am, I'll do it now.
All right.
Thanks, ma'am.
Thank you.
Okay,
Bye-bye.
bye.
Thank you, Chair. The next one is going to be a conversation between Ambassador Koloane and Major NGC.
Okay.
Thank you.
Good day, Warren speaking.
Hello?
Hello, sir.
Yeah, it's about the Quran again. I believe they've spoken to Quran Anderson.
Yes, I was about to phone you, sir. Now everything is sorted out, sir. I'll go ahead with the clearance.
And when do you think we'll be able to issue that number?
And now, because I'm busy with it now, sir, what I'm going to do, when I'm finished, I'll fax it to Mr. Malachi. No, Mr. Machila.
Where are you at the Air Force Base?
Yes, but I'm at HQ, command post.
I don't know where you're from.
At DECO, next to prison.
Come again?
And next to prison, Air Force headquarters.
In Victoria?
Yes, in Pretoria, next to prison, our prison. At DECO Road, you see the DECO Road?
The foot bank road?
DECO Road.
I don't know.
Next to...
Do me a favor.
Yes, sir.
When was issued, you probably to scan it and send me a copy.
Let me have your email, sir. Hold on, let me get the pen.
Because I'm not at the office, can you send it to Vusi?
That's the email address.
Yeah.
Yes, Vusi.
Vusi, V-U-S-I 321
Vusi 321
at Yahoo
321 at Yahoo
.co.uk. Yeah, but you can also copy my office email, which is Koloane,
V
at DERCO. .gov.za.
Yes, I'll do that, sir. So the both emails, can copy those two?
Yeah. Do you think it could be done by then?
No, that will be late, sir. It will be done by 4:30.
Then you give me a call and send it, no problem.
I'll do that. Confirm, sir, that Vusi is 321 at yahoo.co.uk. Is it correct?
Correct.
No, thanks, sir.
Okay.
Thank you, sir.
Was that the last one?
No, Chair.
The next one is between who and who?
The next one, Chair, will be between Major NGC and Captain Ketty.
Okay.
Yes.
Good morning, Captain Kuti.
Captain, how are you?
Fine, thank you.
Fine. You're speaking to Warren GC from South African Air Force.
Yes?
We spoke yesterday, you remember?
Yes, yes.
So will you please confirm, please, I don't know that information, I'm going to get it now because I'm busy with the currents, that are they going to request fuel?
Are they going to request fuel?
Yeah.
Yes, fuel is there. The fuel requirement is there.
No, it's not.
40 tons.
Sorry?
40 tons.
40 tons.
Yes.
But when it is not written on the what you call?
I'm sorry?
It's not written on the request that I'm looking for now.
It's not written in the request.
Yes. That's why I'm phoning you now. It's not written there.
In the request, I understand that there is no column, which is why it is not mentioned.
There is no?
Column.
There's no space in the request for mentioning. No, but yes, but you can say it by reading. Will you please have something there on so that you send it to me now on my email or on my fax number? All right. What? Okay, fine. We'll add that. So, but what I'm saying, to have some document now saying how many fuel liters you request, so that because I'm busy with the currents, I don't want to close the system, because the minute I close the system, I must redo it again. All right. So I'll send it to you on your fax. A requirement of 40 tons. Do you have my fax number? Please tell me. 012 312 2525. 2525. Yes. All right. And your name? Could you just spell your name? Tabo. Yes. T-A-B-O. Yes. Okay. T-A-T-H-A-B-O. T-H-A-B-O. Yes. All right. Your rank? Warrant officer. Warrant officer. Yeah. Yes. All right. Okay. Thank you, warrant officer. I'll just fax that to you. Captain, are you going to do it now, sir? Sorry? Are you going to fix it now? I'm going to fax it now. I'll be 10 to 15 minutes and I'll fax it to you. Okay. Thank you. Okay. Bye-bye. Okay. Bye.
Thank you, Chair. The next one will be between Lieutenant General General Lombard and Major GC.
Yes,
Yes,
okay.
thank you.
Hello, Mr. Koloane. Yes, sir. Gitabo from Sanchez. Yes, just waiting for Captain in the Tanzania Fair document here work. But everything is done, sir, because I promise you that by quarter past I'll be emailing it to you. But I'm just waiting. I'll wait for you. Yeah, I'm waiting just for him, just the fair document with how many fuel they require there for Waterkloof. How many? Fuel. They're going to need. Okay. Yes. No, it's fine. So as soon as I'm done, I'll forward it to you, sir. Okay, very good. Thanks, bud. Sure.
Chair, apologize. That was between Major GC and Ambassador Koloane.
Your mic is not on.
I beg your pardon, Chair.
Yes.
That was between Ambassador Koloane and Major GC.
Yes.
With Major GC reporting as to how
reporting
far
back.
he is. Then the next one, Chair, will be between Brigadier General Lombard and Major GC.
Yes.
Good day.
Good day, how are you?
I'm alright, yourself, sir.
Well, you're speaking to Lieutenant General.
Yes, sir.
I just want to confirm something here.
Uh-huh.
General Lombard.
Uh-huh.
Do we write Officer Commanding Air Force Command Post with an S at the end or not?
I don't understand that. Air Force Command Post.
Post, no S.
How do you write post? Just hold on, let me just see. Yeah, Air Force Command Post.
Without S?
Yeah, without S. Yes, I know it.
Okay.
Okay.
Is the general in?
I beg your pardon?
Is the general in today?
No, I get it.
Where is he?
Umtata, I think.
Sorry?
Umtata.
Oh, Gupta.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
Sure.
Bye-bye.
Chair, this will be between Major GC and a certain lady called Sarah. And a certain lady called Sarah. I think there is somewhere her surname, Pakalani, I think. No, it's not. No, it's just referred to as Sarah. Yes, thank you, Chair.
Message you responding.
Message yanda.
Noma thumele busuku ngo-1 or ngo-12 or ngo-3.
Ngifuna ukuphendula ngoba ngicabanga ukuthi mhlawumbe endlini hey yazi
Ngoba ngitshela ngalizobhoko wena nginamsebenzi ngibhokile life yami le.
it's a life mara it's in
Sorry, please baby. Let's not go there.
Yes.
Uthola message ngithumela.
Yeah, ngitholile.
Okay, mamela how far?
Kumele ngihlangane naye this week. So this week nginenkinga. Kumele ngiyeThekwini.
Sir.
Anginamali ngicela imali.
Saka uma ngincane mana ungicasule. Manje kanti wangamfunela ngaphezulu.
Hawu, siyakhuluma mina nalo muntu.
But manje uthini yena?
Uthi nize kuye.
Manje wena uyinto ebambile phela.
Thabo yazi wena Thabo uthanda ukula yazi.
Hayi yena ngini uyaziwayo ukuthi ngithanda ukulo ngoba manje ngufaka ekhonini yinto ebambile.
Lapho ikhethe Thabo.
Mamela sisi before ngigetse kunento engifuna ngenzele ifavor yona ne.
Yini le?
I think lo muntu uyamazi lo muntu esikhuluma lo muntu uzomazi lo muntu engimfunayo. Anele ngisebenza khona bayasebenza eDelco yazi iDelco ngisho.
Yeah.
iDelco Department of Internal Relations and Cooperation.
Yeah.
Kunomuntu lapho oyikhimen engimfunayo. Bengikhuluma naye namanje mina ngifuna bengikhuluma naye namanje ne.
Yeah, 100 yeah.
Faka ngicela khona ukuthi ngisho
Ukumamele
so lo muntu lona wena uzomtshela nobhuti wakho osebenza eDefence Force.
Yeah.
But ufuna ukuphuma lapha.
Yeah.
But usabuyile ukapproacha umuntu so uyamazi yena na.
Ubani lo?
Igama lakhe uvusi igama lakhe out.
Uvusi bani?
Uvusi Koloane.
Yazi lo muntu lo kahle wena ukungitshela akafuni ukukhuluma like ngabantu ngayo yabona. Ngibilina ukungitshela ukuthi ngibilana ngenzeni. Ngingambiza like ngizombiza kaSongwana ngithi.
Mani?
Songwane.
Yawo. Owena kumbiza Songwane.
Yeah, bengimbiza kaSongwane.
Yeah.
So ngenza ukuthi ngimbize Jack.
Yeah.
Ngambiza Jack. Manje ngibiza Jack. Yabona wabuza ukuthi man waba worried. Yabona.
Yeah.
Like khona abanye abantu be-ANC engikhuluma nabo. Or akafuni yena. Ngathi no ngibone elokunjaneni kule form leli bekazolanda ilokhunza kuyo.
Musu mbiza ngalelo gama lelo.
Mase ngimbiza ngoJack manje uba yabona ukuthi no man yazi futhi ushiye nemessage ukuthi hey man khona into engangiphathile kahle. Phela ngicabanga ukuthi mhlawumbe wena ukhuluma nabanye mhlawumbe abana or mhlawumbe i-threat or hey angazi kwenzakalani. So nomnayizalo ungifone bese nithi ngamfonela manje ngimfonela ke wathi no man ubani we-ANC omazi ngathi no angazi muntu ngazi wena phela why yabo wathi no man bese ngithi ngibizwe ngoJack and akusukani nobani wazi igama le ngathi no ngibone kule form le.
Okay.
You understand?
Okay.
Yena nje yazi so very sensitive.
No, I know. Yazi wayo nathi ngithi ngifuna ukukhuluma naye ne. Umbuzo ukuthi lo muntu uyamazi na. Umuntu so because umuntu uyifela umuntu uDG yase lento le yase Delco ne. So mina njengoba ngisebenza ama overflight clearances ne. So kunenye into ifeve ngimenzele yona kana manje. You understand? Ye-aircraft yase-India funeka ize nge-29. Yaba ngizokubriefa kahle not efonini ne.
Hayi izalakini-ke kena uthuzela ke.
No, but-ke mamela sithi. Yena manje uma ukhuluma so ngoma uzombuza lo muntu umazelaphi. But simple uzomtshela sithi ubhuti wakho usebenza kuphi eDefence Force. So usebenza ngeyinto eso. Uyakhona ukuthi angakhonta umuntu omosoyamazi na ngoba ufuna ukungena khona, that's all.
Njengoba ukuthi ngithole information futhi sengi-check ukuthi yazi inkinga yami yini Thabo. Angina-airtime nje I'm broke like.
Ukhona nami uyeDurban uyokwenza neDurban.
Umuntu onginvayithile. Ubona uzongilanda uthesta imoto.
Manje
utest driver imoto. Yebo.
Have we not heard the relevant part?
Utest driver
Yes, Chair. This
ESP.
is a personal conversation.
Yeah. If we have heard the relevant part, we don't need to hear personal stuff. Okay. If any of the relevant parties want to listen to the whole conversation, maybe they can do so, but we have heard the relevant part.
Yes, thank you, Chair.
Yeah.
Might I have a transcript of the other conversations, excluding the first one, which was transcribed separately?
Yeah, your mic.
I don't know why I keep on
Yes.
doing that. Thank you. Thank you, Chair. May this be handed in as FF13C And I'll give to my learned friends a copy. Thank you. FF13C, and then may the recordings be marked FF13A.
Take that.
Thank you. Thank you.
Why is this written interview, Sergeant Major GC, and not conversation between somebody and somebody else?
Yeah, I've just noticed that the transcribers, that would be corrected, Chair. In fact, I'll ask the transcribers to sort of an index to identify all the conversations.
This is a transcript of the conversation, it seems, between Major GC, or then Warrant Officer GC, and Colonel Anderson, is that right?
That's correct, Chair.
And it will be marked as Exhibit FF13C.
As Chair pleases.
Yes.
Thank you. Chair, may we then adjourn take the long adjournment?
We are at 1 o'clock,
Yes.
but I think we are close to finishing with Ambassador Koloane.
That's correct, Chair.
If that is so, I suggest we try and finish so that when we adjourn, then we adjourn for the day.
Yes, Chair. Thank you.
Yes.
No, thank you, Chair.
Would that suit you, Ambassador?
It will, Chair.
Yes, and I'm sure your council
Oh,
is happy with it as well.
Thank you, Chair. Yes.
Yeah, let's do that.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Maybe just one question, Chair, from our side. Ambassador, in the transcript, as you listen to the...
I'm sorry, you were also you also said you were asking that the recording be marked
Or the
something,
audio.
but where is the recording?
The recording, Chair, will have to be given to the registrar in a flash disk, in a memory stick.
When you do that, that's
Yes.
when we will...
Will enter it.
I can't enter something that's not here.
Yes, thank you, Chair.
Okay.
All right, thank you. Ambassador, in the transcript between the conversation between you and Major GC, there is somewhere where you're saying that it is not possible, the transcript at page 5, that is FF13B. The challenge is that I cannot put all the detail I am giving you in writing. Was there a reason for not putting those details in writing?
Yes, ma'am. I think before the recording I explained that I had wrongfully used the names of the ministers and the president, and I was not going to risk putting that in writing because I knew that it was a wrongful misrepresentation, basically.
Yes.
And I've admitted that earlier on too.
Yes, no, thank you. Thank you, Chair. I think we've covered most of the areas we needed to cover with Ambassador Koloane. Thank you.
And the 2 pages?
The
you
2
still
pages,
haven't got?
unfortunately, they haven't come to hand, Chair. But I had requested that because Mr. DBA apparently does not have them, and then I've asked that they must just approach DERCO with those.
There might well be something in those pages which
You would want to
might be
canvass.
relevant,
Yes.
which I might have wanted to raise with the witness.
Yes.
Ambassador, Ms. Norman suggested to you this morning, after you have given clarification of your evidence of yesterday, that it may not be true that when yesterday you gave the evidence that you gave with regard to mentioning the name of the president and the ministers, it may not be true that you did not remember, to the extent that your evidence may have suggested that you did not remember whether you had made those statements or not. Or she might have been saying, in regard to some of those statements, you actually denied having made them, and she was suggesting, if that was the case, that it could not be true that you denied in the genuine belief that you did not make those statements. I'm putting this in my own words, but my understanding is that it reflects the gist of what she was saying. Ms. Norman, am I right?
Yes, that is correct, Chair.
Yes.
Thank you.
You understood that suggestion from her?
Yes, Chair, I did, and I found it to be her own or subjective assessment of the situation,
Yes,
which
yes.
cannot be backed up with any tangible evidence. It's
Yes.
all speculative. That's what she thinks. But I also indicated that when people go through very unpleasant experiences in their lives and they go through therapy, one of the reasons is because they want to close that chapter, and so that some of those things don't linger on for the rest of their lives. And just for the record, Chair, I also want to indicate that it was myself, through my legal counsel, who requested the recordings. It's not that we were offered. We requested them because we wanted to refresh, and despite the fact that the information contained therein incriminates me directly or puts me directly responsible in terms of trying to influence officials, we did not make an effort to try and postpone or do anything untoward. All we did is we used that to jack up the memory, and I didn't come here to lie. I came here to tell the truth. And that's why, thanks to the chair authorizing that to be given, that I had the benefit of refreshing my mind through the use of the memory stick, and I was able to provide a correction. That's why I requested that in the beginning of the session. So I believe, Chair, that with all the due respect, she is entitled to her opinion, like I am as well entitled on my own opinion on any other matter. But I will not, therefore, want to give it any status in my assessment.
Well, I think you have a good understanding of what she was saying. She was putting to you what either she makes out of your evidence in that regard, or what she could be saying that's how somebody else might look at it. And you have indicated what your reaction is to that. Now, in the end, I must listen to all sides and look at all perspectives and make findings as to what the position is. It is therefore important that I get your perspective and different perspective as clearly as possible. So part of the questions I'm going to ask you now, part of the reason is that I just want to make sure I understand your perspectives properly. Yeah. Now, you would have known, I think we dealt with this, you would have known within weeks after the incident had happened that the nation through the media was being told that you made statements suggesting that the president of the country, at least I can't remember about the ministers, had a role in this thing. You remember that? You would have known after a few weeks that that's what the media was saying. Is that right? I guess that you would have also appreciated that in the disciplinary hearing, the issue of your use of the names of the president and the ministers was raised again. Is that right? And it ought to have been something that had an impact on you to know that if your version is true, that the ministers and the president had never had a role in this thing, it ought to have been something that had an impact on you, that the nation was being told that you made these statements that, for example, the president had a role, and yet you knew that that was not true, and you knew that you had said that. Is that correct?
Yes, I did, Chair, and I must also again maybe reiterate that at that moment my confidence in the media had been eroded, because they had made all sorts of allegations about me without any tangible evidence. An example was an allegation that the Guptas bought me a property for $6 million in Mauritius and all sorts of things. So I knew if I went to the same people who have been peddling lies like that, they were not going to publish an article which contradicts what they're actually peddling. And like I said, and also I had just had too much of the media writing, I mean, everything that, to be quite honest, the chair will also be aware that before I even sat in some of the committee meetings that where I was asked questions, I had already been tried and found guilty in the media. It's a matter of common cause. Everybody knows about that. And all sorts of permutations were presented, etc. And that's why I could not go to the media. Like I said, I do not believe in playing in the public gallery. But indeed, in hindsight, maybe I should have at least written a letter or letters to the president and express my apology, because I was just too scared or ashamed to go and approach and see him in person. And again, it's something that I may consider doing now that the chair has actually raised that with me. Belated as it is, I will still at least endeavor to write the letters to the three, that is the president and the two ministers, to express my unwavering apology for what I'd put them through. I know it's late, maybe even too late, but at least to take heed of the chair's wise recommendation, I will definitely take that under consideration, and I can assure the chair that such letters will be drafted by myself and sent to them as an expression of apology. But if they then say no, I must come and meet them in person, I will. But right now, I'm just too ashamed to even go and sit and look at their faces.
Well, I wasn't making any recommendation that you should do anything. I was just asking whether you ever considered anything like that, because on your version, the media was saying something that was true to the extent that it was saying you had made statements that suggested that at least the president had a role. You knew that that was true, that you had made the statement, but on your version, you knew that no such statement had been, no such thing had been done by the president.
Chair, maybe I must first apologize for saying you're making a recommendation. You were asking, and I was saying from that I extrapolated that actually maybe it's something I ought to be doing. So I do apologize for misunderstanding the suggestion or the statement that we're making. But as to the issue of what the media was saying, Chair, I do fully concur that it was wrong of me to do it in the first place. But what also got me even more concerned and worried is that every single thing that I was in the newspapers were matters that I was discussing in a NICOC forum. And if issues coming from a NICOC start leaking to the media, then the confidence issue starts being raised into question. The highest security cluster in the country leaks things in less than 24 hours after the meeting. You realize that no matter what you do, whatever you say, it's going to fall onto dead wood, because the mere fact that it leaked, it was a deliberate thing that somebody from within that committee decided to leak that kind of information, because I've never said it in a public forum. It was leaked when it was actually within the NICOC frame. So for me, the issue was if the institutions which you believe is the custodian of secrecy and all the norms and values that come with that starts leaking information, it makes you wonder whether you can actually, win or succeed if you even go make an effort to talk to the media. And thirdly, they could have accused me of trying to deal with the issue of the investigation through the public domain in the media. So there were all those issues that I had to take into consideration. I'm not saying I'm justifying or I was right in so deciding, but I'm explaining the circumstances under which I took a decision to just keep quiet and not talk to anybody, definitely not the media.
Now, ahead of you giving evidence in the commission, you had the opportunity of going through relevant documents that the commission has to refresh your memory. Is that correct?
Yes, some, Chair, I did,
Some,
but
yes.
I'm not a legal brain, so I was even struggling to comprehend some, but I did identify the ones I thought might be relevant, so I didn't go through all of them.
Yes. Would it be correct to say that out of all the questions that you would have known you would be asked, one that is very prominent would be whether you had made those statements suggesting that the President and the two ministers had played a role in regard to the landing of the aircraft?
Chair, when I was talking to my legal counsel before I read any document, I just said to them, well, I believe that there are other things that the Commission wants to establish because there was an internal disciplinary process that took place on this matter. So all I was doing was speculating about what else would the Commission be looking for, other than the issues that were dealt with already by the independent disciplinary committee, which was chaired by some advocate, I think from a bar somewhere in Pretoria, which dealt with that. So I didn't focus too much on that. Maybe it was my fault. I thought I was trying to speculate what else could be something that they are looking for.
Can I take it from what you have just said that you did identify the documents relating to the disciplinary process that you went through as some of the documents that would be important for you to go through?
No, Chair, I didn't, because I thought that because the Commission also had access to that and they will know that that had taken place, I thought there was something over and above what transpired during that process that the Commission might have uncovered or wanted to raise with me, because I didn't come here with a preconceived idea of the questions that I'll be getting and what the envisaged outcome from this exercise will be.
Well, I take it that you would have said you want to be as ready as possible for any questions that you may be asked at the Commission in going through the documentation. Is that not the position?
Yes, that is correct, Chair.
And I would have thought that the documents relating to the disciplinary hearing would have been high on the list of documents that you would need to go through to refresh your memory in terms of what had transpired there, what did you say there, or what was found by the chairperson in regard to those charges.
Chair, I think I had the benefit that my legal counsel had looked at those documents, so when I met with them, they did talk to some of those issues. So I then put priority into reading documents that I had not seen before, so that at least I would understand what is happening.
And the other documents that you talk about, would that have been the report of the Justice Cluster investigation team?
Correct, Chair. I went through because I had never received it before being contacted by the Commission, the report of the JCPS cluster, so I had to go through that as well.
You went through that report?
Yes, I did, Chair.
Yes, and the report of the report and documents relating to the SANDF Board of Inquiry, did you also go through those?
Chair, those I got very late and my legal counsel had looked at them, so we just had a discussion around some of the contents of that internal inquiry or board that was conducted in defense, yes.
Yes. Now, when you went through the Justice Cluster investigation team report, of course you would have come across that part of the report to which Ms. Norman drew your attention yesterday, where it was suggested that Mr. Nchisi had said, you said to him that the President had a role to play in this in regard to the issue of the request for clearance and the landing of the report, and that the two ministers that Minister Ben Martins had been instructed to assist, and that the Minister of Defense had no objection. You saw you saw that part as you were preparing.
Yes, I did, Chair.
Yes. And are you saying when you saw that part, you still did not recall that, in fact, you had invoked the names of the President and the two ministers in order to put pressure on officials of the Department of Defense to either expedite the process or grant the request?
Chair, I was not sure. I was wondering whether I did or I didn't, because there are certain things, like any society, there are certain cultural or social practices that tend to dominate. And when you're talking to some of your friends, you speak differently in terms of what you say and how you say it compared to when you're talking to somebody who's a total stranger. And like I indicated before, I had never, ever in my life met or seen Mr. Njisi. So it was the first time that I spoke to him telephonically that day when I made the inquiry. So it was in my head, I was like, could you have said this to somebody who was a total stranger? And that's why I was not certain, Chair, whether I had actually said it. And that's why I requested my legal counsel that we request the audio recording so that we'll be able to check our memory.
And did it not occur to you that in the disciplinary hearing, one of the allegations had been that you had invoked these names to try and put pressure on the officials of the Defense Department? And did it not occur to go back to that documentation and say, let me see what I said or what was said here?
Well, I might have just browsed through some of this, but like I was saying, Chair, I thought through the question session I might remember some of the things, but I think my principal focus was into attending more to new documents that I'd never ever come across, because I thought it would be extremely prejudicial to myself if I did not read the files, the thick files of documents that I'd never ever come across in my life, and focus my attention more on the documents that at least had crossed my desk before. So it could have been a miscalculation on my side, but I just didn't want to come to you in the commission, in front of you, Chair, in the commission, and not have had a chance of even at least having a glance at some of the documents in question.
You didn't think it would be prejudicial to not go through the documents relating to, for example, the disciplinary hearing, see what was said then, what you said? You didn't think it would be prejudicial for you not to do that and then give an answer that might turn out not to be what you had said?
Chair, again, I just want to indicate that when we made my opening remarks yesterday, I did indicate that we wanted to give full cooperation to this commission. And I further indicated that, unfortunately, we received the bulk of documentation very late. And Chair, if you look at all the files that you have been given yourself, that have also been given, and I've only had a few days literally to look at, I could have appealed for at least justification through my legal counsel to have the session extended by another whatever period to allow me to go over the documents accurately. But because I also had the benefit of the legal counsel, I agreed to cooperate. And for somebody who's not a legal brain having to go through all of these documents, I can assure you, Chair, and you know it yourself, it's a mammoth task. And in the number of days that I've spent here, because Wednesday and Thursday, I spent my days right inside the session, listening to the session. So effectively, I only had a Friday and part of Saturday with my legal counsel to engage on these issues. But still, I have said to my legal counsel, and they've also wisely advised me, that they do not believe that it's wise for me to want to appeal for an extension so that we can, for whatever reason, and despite the shortcomings. So that we had identified, and that's why we came forth. And I'm trying to explain that, Chair, because if you look at the files and the number of documents I've had to go through, I think even people who are students studying if you give them all of these documents and want them to pass an exam in the same period of time that I've been, it will really be very unfair on them.
Well, I just want to emphasize again, I'm asking you all of these questions because it's important for me to understand various perspectives, what's possible, what could have happened, what could have made you give certain answers and so on. So to be fair to you, but to be fair to whoever might be thinking of something different or a different interpretation to yours. So one of the things that was said by, excuse me, Warrant Officer Ntshisi in the conversation in the recording that we listened to, or rather, one of the things that you said to him, as I recall, is that this case was a unique case. You remember that?
Yes, I do, Chair.
Yes. What was unique about this case?
I think I tried to respond to that question earlier, Chair, but I'll
Yes, you
try
did,
again.
but I just want to...
And Chair, what I was saying is that for me, there was a question in my head of saying, is this just sheer coincidence or is there a correlation? Because not too long in February, they had, we had been called to a meeting wherein the Guptas indicated they wanted to land in OR Tambo, where in the presence of the Minister of Transport, CEO of AXA and myself, where we advised against it. And they indicated in that meeting that it's because they're going to be having a wedding reception. And again, when the application from the High Commission of India was sent directly to Defense, they did not hide that they were actually going to be hosting these people for a wedding reception, but that they had ministers on board who were coming. So for me, that's why I thought, there's far too much coincidence here. And that's why earlier I admitted that maybe I failed in my duties because I should have advised somebody senior in the department and said, look, whilst I'm not saying grant or not grant, but this is my observation, and at least share that information with them.
My understanding is that you may have said this is a unique case to suggest that whatever may have been his understanding, whether in this type of situation he should grant or refuse. This is a case which he needed to treat with special considerations. Is my understanding of what was meant by unique case correct?
I will say to a certain degree, yes, it is correct, because like I said earlier as well, Chair, that I also wanted not only for him to process, but also I was hoping that it will be a successful processing of that application.
Well, I was going to go to that aspect of hoping. It may be that when I review all the evidence at some stage, look at your evidence, look at the evidence of Major Ntshisi, look at what was recorded and listen to it again, and look at the evidence of other witnesses. It may well be that I have to ask myself the question whether your case is a case where, when you said yesterday in regard to certain statements that you could no longer remember whether you made them or not, whether this was a case where you genuinely could not remember or did not remember, or whether it was a case of somebody who was hoping that there would be nothing that could contradict him, and if there was nothing, that's how it would stay. But once he saw or he heard the recordings, he then realized that this could not work. So I may have to look at which one of the two the position is. You understand?
Yes, I do understand.
Yes.
Chair.
So, and I'm just mentioning that part of why I'm asking these questions is to try and make sure that I have your full perspective, your side of the story. And with regard to saying this is a unique case, I get the impression that it was more the result, that you were looking at a favorable result. But you have emphasized a number of times that your focus was on the process. But you have said there was hope that the result would be a positive one.
Correct.
You understand, and that's where you stand.
Yes, I understand exactly what the chair is saying, and I also hope that the chair will take into account the timing of when myself and my legal counsel were provided with all the documents we had to go through, and look at the bulkiness of that to also appreciate that for somebody like myself who's not a legal brain, I want to repeat, going through all of these files plus the 3 that are here and all of this, it's a difficult thing. And that I did, Chair, want to appear before the Commission so that, because when the Commission invited me, the first one letter was just basically saying I must come and listen to the testimony of Ms. Sindane so that I can exercise my right to question her or to cross-question or cross-examine, of course, following the procedure as was explained to me by legal counsel that had to be followed to request such and all of that. And that's what I understood that I was supposed to come and do. And then 2 days before flying in, I got another correspondence saying that I have to come and testify. 2 or 3 days, I can't remember, that I actually have to come and testify. But it all happened the correspondence was all within a week of each other. And I know that my legal counsel also wrote to the Commission to try and clarify what, I don't know what is it, Rule 303 or whatever the case may be, what it means and the terms of reference.
Notices, yeah.
And so there was that to and fro in terms of communication. So the actual process of starting to really prepare for coming down happened for me, Chair, on effectively on on Monday afternoon, when I got an email saying, can you confirm which airport you fly from the Netherlands, from where you stay to Johannesburg? Do you need transport to pick you up? That was on Monday. I responded in the afternoon, I got a ticket saying tomorrow you're flying in. So I was flying in on Tuesday, arrived here Tuesday evening. Wednesday and Thursday, I was sitting here in this very same room listening to the other testimonies. So all of that also took away the time I could have utilized to go through some of the documentation myself. But I just thought I must just put that on record as well so that the chair will be aware that whilst I'm not in any way insinuating that the Commission is not fair, but I'm just raising issues which were worrisome issues for me when I considered everything else, and which almost prompted me to persuade my legal counsel to consider requesting a postponement.
Yes.
But in hindsight, I also thought that the national duty and some of the important conferences that are going on, starting from tomorrow effectively, which are very critical for the work we do, also in the Security Council, etc. I thought, we will not also want to come with an unreasonable request to the chair and say we want a month or 2 months extension, because that will appear as though we are running away from seeing, the Commission conduct its business properly and efficiently and finishing as and when they would like to. So that's why we agreed. And again, I must admit, my legal counsel also wisely advised me that it may not be to my best interest, nor to their best interest either, to do so. So that's why we're here. But we just thank the chair for giving us the audio recordings yesterday, for authorizing that we get the audio recordings, because they helped. They're very helpful.
Thank you. Ms. Newman?
Chair, I apologize.
Anything arising?
Yes, Chair, just to put, because I think it's only fair to place this before the Chair.
Yes.
These are notes that relate to a meeting that Ambassador Koloane had with the investigators for the Commission at The Hague on the 29th of May 2019. I'm just thinking there's 3 matters which he might want, which are matters that are in the public domain, which he might want to comment on. With your leave, Chair, I beg leave to just, it shouldn't take more than 5 minutes to do that. Thank you. Ambassador, is it correct that you had a meeting with some of the investigators from the Commission on the 29th of May 2019 at The Hague?
Yes, it is.
Yes, and your counsel has confirmed that a copy of the notes that the team made from that meeting was made available to you.
Correct.
Thank you. I beg leave, Chair, to hand up the notes, and I ask that they be marked as Exhibit FF14. I just want to draw your attention. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Chair.
The document
It's written information note.
appearing to be notes made when certain investigators of the commission, which looks like Mr. Pat Mlambo and Mr. Lionel Grunewald,
Yes, sir.
interviewed Ambassador Koloane on the 29th of May 2019. That document will be marked as Exhibit WF14.
As Chair, please.
Yes.
Thank you, Chair. Ambassador, because these are matters that are out there in the public domain, and I think it's fair that you must comment. You had commented to the investigators and gave them your version on those allegations which were put. I'd like to direct your attention to page 14, paragraph 54.
I'm sorry, are you
14, Chair?
are you referring to the same exhibit?
Same, I beg your pardon, yes, Chair. Exhibit FF14, 14, and then the page, Chair, is page 14.
Yes.
Thank you, Chair. And then paragraph 54, you answered a question there, Chair, Ambassador, where you were asked about allegations which were in the press relating to negotiating business deals on behalf of the Guptas and KPG greenhouses whilst you are still occupying that position as the ambassador in the Netherlands. Could you just briefly tell the Chair what your response was to that question?
Yes, Chair, I was asked the question, and I confirmed that indeed one of the Gupta associates or Gupta-related companies wrote to me and or to the on my capacity as ambassador and asked if I knew of a company called KGP Greenhouses because they're interested to have a meeting, and can I assist them in setting up a meeting, and they sent me the information about the company because I didn't know the company. And one of the duties of ambassadors, Chair, is that we service all South African citizens irrespective of race, gender, color, religion, or creed, or even political affiliation. So since the Guptas had then, I'm not sure whether that status has changed now, they were also the bona fide South Africans. I had a responsibility not to discriminate, but to ask my team to assist in setting up that meeting for them. And that meeting was arranged for them, and they went to meet with that particular company. And subsequent to that, because agriculture is one of our key sectors that we're focusing on in the Netherlands, I've also arranged meetings for other people to go to the same company, so there was no exclusivity accorded to them. I did not go with the Guptas to that meeting, to the Gupta associates to that meeting, but when the then MEC for Economic Development in Eastern Cape, MEC Somio, came to visit the Netherlands together with the CEO of Eastern Cape Development Corporation and some other members of the board, and they told us also interested in the agricultural space. We also arranged meetings for them and also went with them to that meeting, and we subsequently facilitated that the same company come and visit them in the Eastern Cape in Kucha, and even MEC Somio assisted them to identify potential raw material suppliers that they require in their production processes. But there's also other companies, I think about 5 or 6 companies that we have actually linked with them because agribusiness and hydroponics is one of the sectors we're interested in.
Yes, thank you. And then in paragraph 60, you were also asked about the coal asset at Mbisi near Mpangeni. Could you just explain to the Chair what that was all about?
Chair, that was nothing else but just an introduction. There is a gentleman, I come from KwaZulu-Natal. I know my surname Koloane could be deceiving and people may think I'm from Limpopo, but I'm not. And having grown up in KZN, I know a lot of people there, and some of them happen to be in the business space. And one of the guys who knew me told me that he has a coal asset and that he has done a lot of geological report and survey, or geological survey, and he's now looking for potential investors. And he had seen me talking to one of the Gupta members when we were having the sort of the Nation Address banquet dinner, and he asked if I could introduce him to him, or introduce him to them so that they could consider whether they will invest with him in the business or not. And that's exactly what I did, just introduction.
Yes. Thank you. And then again, you were asked about allegations of arranging for private accommodation for two friends at the Gupta's luxury Clifftop Lodge.
Correct, I did. There is I've been privileged, Chair, to serve government in different capacities in my young life. One of them was that I was working in Japan as the Minister for Economic Cooperation, basically charged with promoting trade and investment, market access issues, etc. in Japan. And when I was there, I interacted with a lot of people, of course, also in the same space. And there was a lady and her partner who were also there at the time doing their, I think as part of their MBA exchange program that we were working with. So we became very good friends. And one day, and we've been in touch ever since with them. And when she sent me an email saying, we're looking at going to South Africa, we want to go to a safari. And I remembered that, oh, by the way, the Guptas had at some stage in one of the events offered that, told me that they've got one of the best lodges. And I said to them, well, can you please write to these people and consider if, you could go there, ask them what are the prices. And also I said to the Guptas, I'll be happy if you give them a good rate.
Yes. And then lastly, Ambassador, the allegations that you solicited golf sponsorship from the Guptas
I did.
For your wedding anniversary?
No, it's a lie that is on my wedding anniversary. Every year, except last year, for the last, say, 10, 11 years, I've been doing a charity golf tournament in my town, in my small hometown called Pietermaritzburg. And all I do is I write to all the people that I know have got businesses, and I write not only to one, I write to many people to see if anybody would be willing to provide a sponsorship. Unfortunately, they did not come to the party.
Yes. And just lastly, Chair, if I may just refer the Ambassador to Exhibit FF5, the email that makes reference to the wedding party. I wouldn't want a situation where there's an allegation that you made no reference to your wedding anniversary. At least to clarify that before we part ways. It's FF5. It's an email, at page 252. Thank you. Do you recognize that email?
Yes, I do.
Okay, and it's dated the 29th of January 2016. What do you say there to Ashu? It was Ashu Chawla, is that correct?
This year marks 20 years since I married my wife and went to host a golf tournament in December in Pietermaritzburg on my celebration.
Yeah, as part of?
Can I read again?
Yes, sir.
As part of my celebrations.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, could you just read the entire email?
This is besides the party I will have at home with family. I'm writing to you to request your support in sponsoring some prizes that I could use during the golf tournament. Should you be in a position to help, an indication of type of prizes you might be able to sponsor will help in the planning phase. I look forward to hearing from you.
Yes, thank you. So this tournament was linked to your celebrations for your wedding?
I could have said that because it was coinciding with that, but generally I'm just saying I've been doing these golf tournaments for the last 11 years, well, except for the last 2 years, I think last year or two,
yes,
where I've been doing them every year for charity, then benefiting some of the people who stay in what we call the drop center, where there's a place in my township where you've got people who are orphaned because of HIV and AIDS, and whatever money we raise from there, we then go and pay the supermarket and the butchery that they supply them with food every week or every second week, because if you give people the money, somebody says they're looking after the interests of the people and they use it. So for me, it's because I do it every year, except like I said for the last 2 years, because the state of, the weight of the rand has been very weak.
Yes, so it is not incorrect, therefore, to say it was linked to your wedding anniversary celebrations?
Well, we can say that.
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much, Chair.
Just one last thing, Ambassador. in the conversation that Colonel Anderson had with Warrant Officer GC, among other things, she said, if DERCO approves the visit, then I'm putting it in my own words, you can grant or should grant clearance. You remember that part in the recording?
Yes, I do, Chair.
Yes. I note that there she talks about if DERCO approves, and my mind goes back to that email from your PA saying Ambassador Koloane has telephonically approved.
Chair, again, I may just want to reiterate that protocol does not approve visits that are incoming or outgoing.
Yes.
Because that is the principal domain of line function.
Yes.
So the approval will not come from protocol, but will come from the relevant minister. If there is a minister who wants to visit of agriculture from another country, then our Minister of Agriculture will have to consent on the dates, and then we communicate that information to the embassy, and once they confirm the timing of arrival, etc., be it through commercial airline with facilitate protocol officers to assist at through the protocol lounge in Tambo, or if it's Waterkloof, again, we activate accordingly. But the actual approval, and I can only say, for me, it's a misunderstanding of the internal workings of how DERCO operates, but definitely the approval does not come from protocol because we don't deal with the substantive issues, and we therefore can't say, yes, come when we don't deal with those kind of issues.
But I think you may have said in your evidence earlier that there would be other sections of DERCO which are supposed to approve.
Yes, Chair. Those sections are what I refer to as the various branches. We have in DERCO a branch that deals with Africa, and then we have one that deals with Asia and the Middle East on bilaterals, another one dealing with Europe, and then another dealing with Americas, besides the one that deals with multilateral issues. So if a visit is coming from Latin America, the DDG who heads the branch America and Latin America will be the one who will then be ultimately responsible for receiving or sending that note verbal, which confirms that, but it doesn't come from protocol, and they don't send it through protocol either. They communicate directly with the embassies. And the only time we get involved, therefore, is when we have to implement the actual logistical arrangements.
No, thank you very much. Thank you very much, Ambassador, for coming to give evidence. You are now excused.
Thank you, Chair. Will I be allowed also, Chair, to, seeing that there's already a precedent set, will I also be allowed to fly out tonight back to my mission in the Netherlands?
Yes, you
and of course avail myself for any future inquiries, be they in an email form or otherwise.
Yes. No, thank you. You may fly out this evening, and if there is anything, the Commission will be in touch with you. And as you indicate, you will cooperate.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair. That would be the last witness for the day. But, Chair, we are not closing Waterkloof. And we will indicate to the Chair, maybe in chambers, as to what else needs to be done.
I did indicate that I would like Major Njisi to be recalled.
Yes, Chair, there's just a slight complication which we'll explain to you in chambers.
No, that's fine. It might not be, it might not necessarily be tomorrow.
Yes, or this week. Yes.
But I think I would like to have him recalled.
Yes, Chair.
To the witness stand so that he can clarify certain aspects of his evidence.
Yes, Chair.
But I also want to know what is the position with Colonel Anderson?
Chair, we were advised by the investigators that Colonel Anderson now lives in Botswana, and I'm so sorry, I beg your pardon. She was represented by at some point by Grizzle attorneys. And then I think a couple of weeks ago, those attorneys indicated to the Commission that if we might want to make contact with her, we must do so directly. And then a letter was written to them asking about their mandate and whether their mandate is terminated. I have not followed up on that, Chair.
But why was the letter asking asking them whether their mandate had
Because-
terminated when they said write directly to her?
No, that was the very reason, Chair, because you can't represent someone and then later on you say to the Commission, well, direct these correspondence to
Well,
her. It's either they act
obviously,
or they
it means
don't.
if they won't accept correspondence relating to her, it means that they give permission
No, but
to
Chair,
write
they
directly.
had meetings with the Commission which
Yeah.
dealt with the issues that related to Colonel Anderson.
Yes, no, but what I'm saying is, if they have represented her,
Yes,
and they say, from now on, write directly to her, they are saying, we have no further communication, we are not going to be communicating with you on her behalf. But anyway, where is the process of establishing whether she can come and give evidence?
Chair, from what they had indicated to the Commission at the time when they said they were representing her, they said she was not prepared to come. But then we need to follow up on what is, because we've been engaged with the hearings, we have not followed up to see
Okay, if
how
that-
far that process is.
Yeah, if that
Yes.
could be followed up,
Yes.
that would be important.
Yes, Chair.
Okay, no, that's all right.
Thank you.
That's where we end for today.
That's correct, Chair.
And tomorrow, it's evidence relating to, I think, is it Transnet?
I think my colleague Silo
Yeah.
is leading evidence tomorrow, yes.
Okay, all right. We are going to adjourn the proceedings now, and tomorrow we will start at 10 o'clock.
Yes,
We
Chair.
adjourn.
Thank you.